This is the DRS train.
I'm Peter Brook. I'm joined by Ciaron Smith and NavF1, and you're listening to the DRS Train podcast. So, Qatar was fun, wasn't it? 30 laps of almost nothing, and then the stewards decided this was boring. It's like, oh, let's just do whatever and see if we can make this more interesting.
Well, that's the three of us together for the first time in a few months, I think. So that's really nice. And yeah, this race was really good. Qatar does not deliver the best racing, but thanks to the stewarding and just all the off-track nonsense in terms of drivers getting annoyed at each other and all the replacement rumors, this was a fun weekend to discuss.
Yes, the championship is over, but the drama continues, I suppose. Like you both mentioned, a lot happened, and not just on track, but off track as well. So, I think starting with the big news with Alpine, I think that was something that I didn't see coming, but, Alpine have already signed Jack Doohan for next year, and I guess they want to bring him in as soon as the next race. Bit of a shocking move. I think Ocon deserves a better send-off than that, but what did you guys think?
They seem to be, there's a lot of theories going around about the reasons for this. I mean, apparently Ocon is happy with it because what it does is it releases him to drive for Haas in the post-season test, which is fair enough if you want to get an early start, because some people want to do that. I mean, Hamilton, for example, doesn't, so he said he didn't actually want to go with Ferrari in Abu Dhabi and everything. But other people are saying that maybe they're doing this to try and give him one race to prove himself, and then they'll decide if they're going to throw Colapinto in instead and scrap Doohan's contract, which is extremely unfair, particularly because Colapinto, the hype is beginning to wear off now. But unless they're Nikita Mazepin, you can't realistically test somebody after one race and evaluate them on that. So maybe they thought we'll just give him a little bit of a head start and see where it goes from there.
On paper, it looks like they just want to give a head start, but we need to understand that Alpine are just doing this out of spite. Ocon could have easily just done the post-season test with Haas and also raced for Alpine. I mean, Alonso did exactly that, and that was fine. That's legal, and Alpine were fine with Alonso doing that. So this is just Alpine trying to mess up Ocon now and giving him some kind of. That's the thing. No one knows how bad it has come to in the Alpine team between Ocon and the squad, because on Canal Plus yesterday they were mentioning how there is a clear issue in Ocon's car at the moment in terms of floor or engine, whatever. That there is a clear issue that they have known for a few races, but they're just not fixing it because why would they waste money on it? And they have told Ocon to not talk about it. And I am so sure that that's the case because not just as an Alonso fan, as a Formula One fan, we can recognize Ocon is not a bad driver. Ocon is not a half a second worse than Gasly driver at all. They are so evenly matched. There's a tenth between them, and maybe on a race, you will see Ocon out-qualify Gasly by half a second, or Gasly do the opposite. Gasly has been wrecking Ocon for the last 2 months. That is not normal. And finally, on the rumors, there is also a rumor going around that Doohan has a race clause, and Alpine are going to try to circumvent it by giving him one race and then instantly turning on him, because apparently he is guaranteed in his contract to have a race, and the wording is very vague. So we will see what goes on with that. But what do you guys think about this Ocon Gasly thing? Because we have kind of turned this into an Alpine discussion. That's fine. Let's just do that. Ocon should not be getting beaten like this by Gasly, and I think there's an issue there.
Yeah, I'd like to just jump in there. It was good stuff. So I totally agree. And we've seen this so many times before. We saw it with Alonso and Ocon. We saw it with Raikkonen and Grosjean. We've seen it with others in the past as well. The outgoing driver always is disadvantaged and given less preference. Because as you implied, Nav, why on earth would the team want to make their outgoing driver look good against their incumbent? They wouldn't. They have no incentive to do it. And it benefits them not to. So I do think that what you said about the floor and possibly some car issues are very real. I think this gap is exaggerated. I don't think Ocon is slower than Gasly. And if he is, it's certainly not by more than a tenth. And that doesn't take away from Gasly doing well, but I don't take the Alpine form book right now as being, I don't take it at face value. I do think there are other things driving that. It's classless. It's Ocon's fault in a way because this stems from his comments in the preseason launch, which feels like yesterday, when Mercedes announced that there will be a vacancy, right, in their team. And Ocon went to the preseason launch giving interviews saying, I'm proud of my connection to Mercedes. And that infuriated the Alpine board. And from that day on, he's had tension with the team. So, Esteban doesn't deserve this, but he also brought this on himself by provoking a very nationalistic and clearly sensitive board. So that's how I look at it. Better for both that they're parting ways. Shame it had to end like this. Quickly, before I stop talking here, Jack Doohan, already not my favorite driver, took Kimi Räikkönen's number 7. Are you kidding me? Like, is this a joke? Like, you can't just give these numbers to any kid that wants it. I mean, that's, and then he comes out and says, oh yeah, one of my heroes, Kimi Räikkönen. And then immediately we see him idolizing Daniel Ricciardo, somebody who we know hated Kimi Räikkönen for very childish reasons. I don't buy it. He shouldn't have taken Kimi's number. And frankly speaking, yeah, it's unfair if he gets his contract canceled, but it's F1. It may well be that they think Colapinto is better. We know Briatore likes Colapinto. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Doohan jumped into a car for one race, didn't do that well, and Alpine just scrapped this contract. That's how it goes. And I do think that may be a possibility.
I mean, these two are interesting, Gasly and Ocon, because we see there are lots of examples of drivers in F1 history where their careers and their lives seem to be kind of intertwined with each other forever. So you can say, Prost, Senna, Schumacher, Hakkinen, Hamilton, Vettel, Alonso, Raikkonen, that sort of thing. And this is another example about it because they're a very similar age. They're both French. And when you look at their stats, they both have one win that kind of came out in a slightly fluky manner. But also, in terms of career stats, so using the modern point system, Ocon has 445 points from 156 starts, so that's a points average of 2.85. Gasly has 431 points from 152 starts, so that's 2.84. So their career record it's almost identical. So they seem to just be inextricably linked in that way, and I guess it fits then that they're in terms of a rivalry that apparently they get on now, even though they haven't for most of their lives or whatever. But with Doohan, yeah, we've had it seems like a very illegitimate reason to get rid of his contract, because normally contracts that get scrapped early it's because of lack of money, not because we've done one race, you didn't do very well, so we're going to test someone else who's done more races and has done kind of okay, but is also starting to screw them up a lot and just throw him in instead. It obviously is the Flavs working, because I'm pretty certain that Doohan signed that contract before Flavio came back in or whatever, and now he seems to be changing things. They got rid of Bruno Famin and brought in the other guy. I don't know.
The other thing is, we see that a lot in Formula 2 and Formula 3. Driver swaps before the end of the season just to prepare for the next season. Any Formula 2 fan will see that the Abu Dhabi race is always just a bunch of rookies because they're preparing the drivers for the next Formula 2 season. We don't really see it a lot in Formula 1, but one instance was Nakajima in 2007, Williams. they got rid of Alex Vogt before the end of the season, and they put Nakajima in. Yes, Peter.
They didn't get rid of him. He left. He retired.
He left, and
He retired
but
one race early for some bizarre reason. I don't know.
but exactly. Do you think that was a retirement, or Williams, Toyota saying
Maybe he was maybe he was traumatized by Lewis beaching the car in the gravel. I don't know. And just thought, I can't go on. I can't do this anymore. It's too much. You know.
I feel like it was basically he was pushed a bit for Nakajima, but yeah, that's not something we see a lot in Formula One. And one thing we definitely did not expect in terms of French civil war was that it would not be between Ocon and Gasly, but between Ocon and the team that had him for 5 years. That just doesn't sit well with anyone, and even the French fans. I mean, all the French fans who Alpine have been trying to get behind, they have completely turned on them. Like, they're so tired of the bullshit from Alpine. They know that they're a laughing stock to the entire world. So, but yeah, talking about laughing stock, let's move on to stewarding. Stewarding was interesting this weekend. Lots of penalties that we had not seen since a decade, really. Drive-through penalties, stop-and-go penalties, stuff that we were used to seeing back in the day, back in the nice V8 days, and they came back. As a good example, one of my friends who really got into Formula One in 2020 messaged me and was like, what the hell are drive-through penalties? And I got a bit flustered. I was like, you know so much about Formula One. How do you not know about stop-and-go and drive-through penalties? Without realizing how those were not a thing anymore. And suddenly, they've dumped like 3 drive-through penalties in the same race and a big stop-and-go penalty to Lando. So what did you guys think of the new gen stewarding, as they're calling it?
I mean, this weekend, wasn't it? Derek Warwick, I think, was one of the stewards this weekend, unless he was on in Vegas. And Herbert still does it, doesn't he? But it just it was weird to see things, because like you kind of forget how long it's been since we used to see those things, especially stop-go penalties. Those are really, really rare. I mean, the other recent examples I can think of, Hamilton, Monza 2020. Apparently, Mazepin got one in 2021. Otherwise, they don't really happen. It seems to always just be time penalties, particularly ones issued after the race, and usually very small ones. Because again, I remember the days when you had people getting friggin' 25-second time penalties. In the actual race control aspect of it, I mean, we've seen this is now the second race for Rui Marquez, isn't it? Replacing Niels Wittich. I mean, it was a bit random to get rid of him 3 races before the end, and now the FIA president is having a go at the drivers for calling him out for why didn't you tell us you changed all this stuff. And there were even rumours that Domenicali was going to be let go, and that isn't happening. I don't understand why all this change is suddenly happening right at the end of the season. But I was just looking back at watching the race, and it's like I feel like F1 in general has been run so incompetently for the past, ever since I've been watching it, really. It's every time there's a penalty for anything, it's always a huge talking point. And I feel like it shouldn't, not that I watch other sports as avidly, but I feel like there isn't always this issue with the rules and regulations and the stewarding in other sports creating problems.
Football, everyone hates VAR. I do need to jump in.
VAR, of course, is bullshit in football. But
the semi-automated offside rule cannot come quickly enough, because all the other leagues are using this. The thing they were using at the World Cup and the Euros, where they use a machine to determine it. In the UK, they still aren't doing it, and it's a mess because some people will use the foot and the shoulder, and just saying that some other sports still have some issues.
I think in the ATP Tour in Wimbledon, they're going to get rid of linesmen and use AI instead.
That's bad, because it's the culture of tennis to have.
Yeah, but also AI, it's going to do a straight line looking like the Nürburgring as well. So it's not going to be able to work out if the ball's in or out or whatever. So that's not going to work. But it is. I mean, compared to every other sport, the amount of penalties that get issued out for every race is colossal. Especially in the feed at like Formula 2, Formula 3. After every single race, someone gets a penalty. And it's usually about 10 drivers. I mean, there have been some junior Formula races where I think I found one from a few years back. There was a race where every single driver got disqualified. It's like, well, what's the bloody point in? You may as well just disqualify none of them if you're going to do all of them for that. And we see this all the time. It's like, oh, so and so's got this grid penalty, blah blah blah. And like we had, I mean, Monza 2022. It took hours before anyone actually knew what the grid order was going to be because there were so many different penalties for changing engines and gearboxes and all that stuff. And it's like I think they really need to loosen things up a bit. And it's like, okay, penalise someone if they're obviously cutting corners or if they've done a Senna 1990 and they're trying to kill someone. It's like, oh, you went half an inch off the white line, we can't have that. Or it's like, oh, it just there's so, or it's like, oh, your tire was placed in the wrong place next to the car on the grid. It's like, please, it really is too much.
So I think those are all great points, and certainly some of the frequency of some of those penalties is frustrating. But when I think about the race director, and the FIA, I do think it's been incompetent for several years. Because to me, it's not that they should or shouldn't penalize. To be clear, I think that the FIA could even be stronger in some areas because right now it's so random. Really say that it's very strong. If the FIA would only be stronger on the right things, then they wouldn't actually need to do a lot of other stuff when it comes to constant enforcement because they'd be sending a message that there are clear red lines and clear actions that they won't tolerate. So if you're strong enough to stop some of the stupidity that happens, then there wouldn't have to be these small penalties, here and there just to like patch up things. So right now it just still feels kind of random. A one-place grid penalty, like what is that? Like I've never seen that before.
Apparently, Nico Hülkenberg in 2016 got it, and that's like the only other time that has happened.
All right, but then it's even like certain drivers are driving others off the road. There's no investigation, and somebody like cuts a corner and gets a penalty. It's just random. There still isn't consistency in the stewarding room.
Yeah. I mean, with that one place penalty, because I understand that, the drivers, there is a certain time delta that you have to stick to when you're on a slow lap and not go under that. And I understand that because, you might block someone who's on a hot lap. The thing is, he didn't block anyone that was on a hot lap. Like George went past him, but George was on a slow lap. It's like that's where you need to actually take out the hard and fast element of the rule book. And it's like, actually, no, has this negatively affected anyone? And no, it hasn't. So he doesn't need the penalty. Not that the penalty mattered because he took the lead almost immediately anyway. But that's where they need to just be a bit more logical. And this is where I feel like AI would be probably, if they tried to use AI to decide this stuff, it would be too robotic. It'd be like, oh no, well the rulebook says this, so there's your penalty, without understanding the context or anything.
Mm-hmm. Totally agreed. And the problem is that at the end of the day, there still isn't a clear just set of rules that I even think that they're following. I mean, I didn't even know that you could be penalized for quote unquote blocking someone on a warm up lap. I didn't even know that was possible. To me, there needs to be like a.
But also, I'm sure that has happened a lot of times before.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Exactly. We've seen that happen. Sorry to interrupt you now, but we've seen that happen so many times in the past.
Yeah.
Why today?
I mean, I was saying this there, that if you're going to do that retroactively, there's several thousand penalties that need to be issued.
And also to answer to why today, I think it's because it was so clearly P1 blocking P2.
Yeah.
Because then it was easy. Because if it was Alonso blocking Sainz, P9 blocking P6, I don't think they would have given it. It's just because it was so clearly a P1, P2 issue. And then this takes us to, apparently George Russell is a teacher's pet B word or whatever it is, because since yesterday there have been lots of claims since Verstappen said that George acts really nice and he's a very nice guy, normal life, but as soon as it comes to stewarding and trying to talk to the use his position as the president of the GPDA, then he kind of abuses his position and kind of complains a lot. We remember this big crash. I mean, the big crash he got in Australia because of Alonso. In front of the media, it was all, I don't think it was Alonso's fault, this was my fault. And then as soon as the race ended, he was crying with the stewards. And that just is not a fantastic sight. And another thing about the warm-up lap, just before I let you Go on, Peter. There were jokes that as soon as Alonso saw that you can now get, because Alonso was defending Max, he was saying that this is a bullshit penalty, which most fans think it was the one race grid penalty. But then fans were like, count on Alonso to block Lawson, to just break in front of, to go into Lawson during a warm-up lap just so Lawson gets a penalty, which he's not going to do, but would be fun to see.
Those two can't get away from each other. But yeah, if Formula One was a school, George would be the hall monitor that has his lunch in the staff room with the teachers. Like he just like him. It's funny. Him and Max, they clearly do not like each other at all. And George,
I think they're the only ones among the young drivers who don't like each other.
Yeah, all the others get on because they were well. I mean, Max was never. Was he in the Twitch quartet in 2020? Was he one of? I don't think
he was one of the guests, but he wasn't in it.
No, it was George, Lando, Alex, and Charles. Yeah. So he wasn't part of that little clique or anything. But George is funny because now I feel like when he was at Mercedes, it was sort of containing his personality a bit because everyone liked him a lot more, and he's just turned into a massive bell end ever since he joined Mercedes. Yeah, Williams. Yeah, when he was there.
Max is very close to Alex, very close to Lando, very close to Charles, but he never plays with George. And you know that this is the kind of stuff that you're like, why the hell are you analyzing this? Well, for those drivers, this is very much you can very much analyze it because you can. If in the current day, some of those drivers aren't playing games with each other, it really means they just don't like each other. They have never been on one of those stupid stream calls together. And yeah, a lot of people have been saying lately that Max versus George would be the most toxic title race that we could get in the current era, because Max and Lando, we saw how it was. Yes, it was tense, but end of the day, Lando is like, oh, Max is the best driver on the grid, and Max is like, Lando could have done better. Max and Charles, they love each other, but Max and George, they would. And Max and Lewis, even though people said it was really toxic, between the drivers themselves, it wasn't really like they respected each other a lot. It was just on track. But Max and George hate each other. So
it's the hall monitor versus the school bully with those two, basically.
Exactly. So
Lewis Hamilton fans are probably indicated because they've been saying this for years that George is quite cunning and sneaky, and now Max is kind of confirming that. So it's interesting. George really knows how to play the political game, and he's much more cunning than I realized. He really does play all the angles.
He studied the rule book.
I think the fact that he is very close to Alonso helps your point. Like he has all the younger drivers, they really respect Alonso. They all think he's really good, but Russell is the only one who actively tries to become Alonso's friend. And that is political. You don't become Alonso's friend if you don't want to get into politics. And I'm sure Ciaron will agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Maybe that's why they hang out and they are seen at the club together, scheming, you know? Maybe Alonso's taught George some tricks, but honestly, George is really showing himself to be, a very complete driver, both in terms of his driving ability, but also just, his ability to just go to the stewards and force his issue. I mean, these are skill sets in F1. I don't like his style. He does seem like a bit of a two-face without insulting his driving talent, because it seems like Max, he seems like that if we're going to believe what Max said. So if what Max said is true, that George was friendly with him and then was desperately trying to cause Max to be penalized in the stewarding room, then yeah, George is obviously somebody who fakes an image in the public, and then as soon as the doors are shut behind closed curtains, he's just viciously trying to put his competitors down. And to his credit, that's what you should be doing. It just seems like the way he does it is a bit excessive, and it's rubbed Max the wrong way. It's rubbed Hamilton fans the wrong way, who for the past 2 years have been incessantly complaining that George is not a team player and he's the sneakiest driver on the grid. So this has come to the fore now this weekend. We've really seen Max call George out, which is a big thing. That's a big deal. And I don't think there's any going back from that immediately. You can't just like a tweet and play some Twitch or play something on a video game and make up. That's a public challenge by Max Verstappen. So the Russell Verstappen rivalry is brewing.
Hmm.
So
To add on that,
exciting.
on that
Ye-
incident, Verstappen got a penalty point for that, which is absurd. You get a penalty point for
Yeah,
actual
it is.
incidents, not just I blocked someone during a warm-up
Yeah,
lap.
you get a penalty point for something that would probably warrant you getting points on your license in real life as well, like not
Yeah.
for just
Exactly.
something
Well,
like that.
to conclude on this stewarding point, do you guys like the harsher penalties or not really?
Okay, my answer is quick, so Peter may have a longer answer. I like harsh penalties for harsh offenses, not volume. So I don't think every single breach should be penalized if it's small. Rather, if somebody moves under braking, if somebody tries to take someone out at high speed, if somebody clearly, cuts a corner with the intention of just speeding, brutal penalties, you know, or if somebody purposely blocks someone on a hot lap out of spite, that should be brutal. But I don't think like what we saw should have been penalized. I've never seen a driver getting penalized for so-called blocking someone on a warm-up lap when neither of them were on a hot lap. I remember Esteban Ocon moving 3 times in braking on the braking zone in Monza 2020 quali when Kimi tried to pass him. There was like a huge uproar over that, and nothing happened. Like Ocon could have caused a plane crash. He moved like 3 times before Variante de la Roja, and the stewards were like, "Oh yeah, but you were both, on a lap, and it didn't matter." For some reason, the rules are again inconsistently being applied. So I'm not a fan of just penalizing anything for the sake of it. Rather, I am a fan of harshly penalizing clear breaches because then I think drivers will actually stop breaking rules because they'll get the message. So that's where I stand on it. So, not a fan of the way things were handled this weekend.
I mean, earlier in the year in Formula 3 in Australia, Nicholas Solov, he got a 5-second time penalty for literally pushing like Alex Dunn into the wall. Like that was more egregious than what Schumacher did to Villeneuve and Jerez. And it's a
Yeah.
5-second. Apparently, it's a 5-second time penalty. But then Lando gets a stop-go penalty for not slowing down for a tiny piece of metal that's not on the racing line.
Exactly.
It's harsh penalties for harsh offences. That's the thing. It's right. That's
Yeah.
where it needs to be not quite so simple as a cut and run thing. Which you can do that when it comes to technical things. I think you can be more clear cut with okay, that's disqualification. But when it comes to driving, there are so many different factors at play that you really have to try and be a bit more nuanced and a bit more reasonable.
So some nuance on it though. The
Totally.
current practice on ignoring double yellows during a race session is and has always been 10 seconds stop and go, and this is something that I found out last night. So they were actually very consistent in the stop and go penalty to Lando. The issue is that I said double yellows, and there is no way for us as watchers to know what's a single yellow and a double yellow. You just see yellow on the screen. So it seemed really harsh to us at the time, but actually, when Kimi got the 10-second stop and go in 2017 Spa, or when Mazepin and Latifi got it, it was for ignoring double yellows. And the reason it's so rare is that usually you ignore double yellows in quali, and that's why you get the penalty. And obviously, you don't have a stop and go in penalty in quali. So the Lando Norris penalty was actually fair, and I think that's why I think he was briefed on it just after the race, because in the interview, Ben, he was telling everyone this was completely fair, I have absolutely no complaints about it. But yeah, the other penalties, that's what was a bit weird. Anyway, moving on to the actual race, the actual pace and race of the cars. Red Bull seemed to really get their shit together in quali. It's hard to talk about the sprints. I know Ciaron also doesn't really care about the sprints, and my favorite driver doesn't care either. So it's hard to make too many conclusions out of them. We will mention what happened with McLaren because that was cute, I'd say. But Red Bull, they got pole position. Verstappen did a really good lap, and during the race, Verstappen won it. So that was a bit surprising, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, this rule about that having a second Parc Fermé period does help because it means you can change setup after the sprint. Otherwise, we would be in the position where you do the sprint and everyone's like, well, I can't change anything, so this is how it's going to be for qualifying in the race. and everyone knows that. And so this, at least it varies things up because they did manage to change things and fix it for quali in the main race, or well, Max certainly did at least. Wasn't he? He was 8th in the sprint, so not brilliant. Checo was last, and then they changed his front wing, I think, just to practice and use it as a test session. And the main race, as I said before, the penalty was meaningless because Max took the lead immediately, controlled it from there. I mean, he did, and he was saying after the race that one of the safety car restarts, he nearly got caught by Lando because he couldn't see the safety car lights, that they weren't working, so he didn't know when he could go. But otherwise, he just controlled it well. Checo did his thing of being ridiculously slow. He fluked his way into 5th place, but then balance was restored to the universe when he decided to just spin off by himself.
I would say he did have a decent race. Like he didn't just fluke into 5th or 4th, but that's the only nuance I'm going to add to this because his quali was atrocious. He did make it to Q3, which was genuinely something notable. But
he was 9th though, while Max
9th
was
and out qualified by Alonso in that Aston Martin, which is terrible. Like there's no way you should be out qualified by that Aston.
Yeah, I mean, it's it just shows in general. I mean, just to both of your points, like Max is able to maximize results, even if he doesn't have necessarily the fastest car. I think this weekend the Red Bull was very fast, as Perez showed. So there's an argument that Red Bull were close to being joint quickest or just behind the quickest car this weekend. And what was interesting was that Max was just he took the lead and he fought with Lando. That's great, but he was so easily able to get his tires in the right window. I mean, the way he conserved rubber. He managed the safety car restart so well. He had no warm-up issues that I could remember in any of them. He even told Red Bull to raise Norris's speed under the yellow flag. So he was just in total control. Like, this was a masterclass in many ways. And this season, more than any other in his career, has shown that he really is the best driver in the sport. So there wasn't really much I could say to that. About that, and with Perez, Nav, you touched on it. I think Peter did as well. He was actually having a decent race, wasn't he? I mean, he was probably set for a podium,
Or 4th.
But or 4th. But he, unlike Max, couldn't deal with cold tires when he was getting ready for the restart, and he just lost the car. So this was another driving error, I think, under pressure, mentally beaten by his teammate. And, frankly speaking, it's, Perez can do so much better than that. Like at the end of the day, you can see this is someone who's like who's rattled. He really is just not in a good mental place. And he's been totally destroyed by his teammate. And there really is no excuse because that Red Bull is fast this weekend. Okay, I mean, that car should be on the podium easily. I still think McLaren have the best car and they haven't maximized it, but Red Bull this weekend was not far behind, if at all. And Perez, once again, just dropped the ball massively. So how can they justify keeping him? Well, they can justify it through financial means. There's no way, as Jenson Button said, that he's going to get re-signed based on performance. This is pitiful.
The thing is, any money he brings in through marketing is probably being offset by the money they've now lost in the Constructors' Championship from him dropping 2 places.
Exactly. Yeah.
He hasn't been on the podium since China. I mean, Max destroying teammates is nothing new, but Gasly and Albon, they fared far better than this. They weren't always being knocked out in Q1. They weren't always at least 10 places behind him. Like they were, even if they weren't getting podiums as much or if ever as they should be, they were still at least top 5 more or less in every race. Maybe a whole minute behind him on the track, but like Perez isn't doing that, and when he does, he makes massive mistakes. Because again, the only race this year where he was actually faster than Max and was on course to beat him was Baku, and he crashes on the final lap, and Max still beats him. It's like they can't. I mean, and again, literally every 2-3 days, there's a new, probably I feel like AI generated statement from Helmut Marko about what they're going to do with him. But they can't keep him on at this rate.
But also the Red Bull crew, they've been making comments on other drivers not being good enough. And it's like, look at your own driver. Literally take care of your own household before talking about others, because you have a driver there who genuinely might be, after Joe's 4 points, I know that's not how it works, but somehow some people do consider it to be how it works. With Joe's 4 points, there is a claim that Perez is the worst performing driver on the grid this entire season, just because of those 4 points. So it's a shame. I don't really know what's going on there. I don't think anyone knows, apart from him just lacking confidence.
Finishes totally right, Nav. And here's another stat for you. If he finishes this season, which he will, in P8, it'll be the lowest position a world champion's teammate has finished since Jos Verstappen in 1994. Isn't that funny?
Who didn't even do the full season as well.
Verstappen. Yeah, you're right. He finished P10 in 94. Michael finished first. Verstappen would be P1 this season, Jos's son, of course. And Perez would be P8. Funny how these things work. But that's just...
I think before that you have to go back to like Hector Rebeque, Ricardo Zanino with Brabham in the early 80s, David Walker with Lotus in 1972 as well.
Walker was like 14th or something. He didn't score
14th or 15th. So like, I think even Keke's, what's his name, Derek Daly. I don't think he was that high up in 82 either. It seems it's all seems to be early 80s, that big imbalance of teammates. Another interesting stat is that last year, race fans, they do their power rankings, and Checo for 2023 was voted the worst driver of the season, even worse than Logan Sargent, which is kind of almost justified, I think, because even that's the fast, basically not the fastest on track, but the most dominant car in Formula One history, and he was messing up that much.
It's. And Perez was also, wasn't he, in the sprint race? Wasn't he like overtaken at the pit lane?
Oh God, that as well. Yeah.
The pit lane entry.
He just didn't move.
I think that's. Yeah, his mind is not.
Yeah. Some people said he was distracted because he was looking in the mirrors at Colapinto trying to pass it. It's like, well, he shouldn't have been looking in the mirrors. He should have been looking at the light and then gone when it goes green. That's how it works. Because you can't be overtaken in the pit lanes. You shouldn't think, oh, he's just going to go around me. It's like he just wasn't paying attention at all.
I must say Colapinto was very smart because he did stay within the white lines, which was a very easy mistake to do. He could have gotten an easy penalty
and he waited until they'd passed the exit as well, so it was legal.
Exactly. So I think that was quite smart. So yeah, anyway, we'll see what happens to Red Bull. No one really knows who's going to be in that seat next year. I really want it to be anyone but Perez, but we know it's going to be. So moving on to McLaren, they had the fastest car, and this time they recognized it. Lando recognized it, Stella recognized it, and they would have probably won if not for the 10-second stop and go penalty, which we discussed a lot already. But what did you guys think of the pace generally? Would they have won, or would Max have defended as he knows how to?
I mean, before that penalty came in, he'd been defending against him the whole race, and there were points he'd built out a gap and it got him out of DRS, which I think Max still would have won it. But Lando, his pace was immense once he had the penalty and was in clear air, because he was something. I mean, admittedly, Bottas had damage, but he was like 4 seconds a lap faster than him when he took 10th off of him. The penalty was interesting because people have, like Anthony Davidson did an analysis of this, that basically the reason that Lando got penalised but Max didn't was that Max did lift off, is that he didn't actually see the yellow lights, but he saw the marshals waving the yellows, and so he backs off for that. And I think he reasons that Lando didn't, and so then dobbed him in to the stewards. And it's like, yeah, to be fair, if he's that observant, fair play to him. But Lando, I mean, the penalty that was insane. Normally, I would have said, okay, it's a double wave yellow, but a wing mirror, and it's off the racing line. It's not like there's a car that's by the side of the track. There are marshals attending to it, and we've had that before with double wave yellows. Suzuka 2014, and that was a big calamity. Just give him, I don't know, a 5-second time penalty. That would have been reasonable. But But even on the radio, they told him, and he gets kind of catty, and he was just like, "Why?" When they were taking the 10-second stop go penalty, and he looked kind of defeated after the race, but also just like, I don't give a shit, because I mean the title's gone. Like if we were still fighting for the championship, everyone would be like, what the fuck is this suddenly? But because it's done, it's like whatever.
Can you imagine if a title race was going on right now and Lando got that penalty? It would have been insane to witness. If Lando, especially if Lando maybe just, let's say just at the restart, Lando passes Max, right? Somehow Max misses the restart and Lando from P1 gets that 10-second stop go penalty. I would have wanted to see that. But yeah, in the end, Lando has scored less points than Gasly over the last 2 races.
Yeah, absurd. Probably a bit of a harsh penalty, to be honest. I mean, the penalty was warranted, but you just question the rules itself if that deserves a 10-second stop and go penalty. You know, it does seem a bit harsh, but it's the rules. Those are the rules. And once again, Lando dropped the ball. I mean, what else can we say about this? He just has not maximized the opportunity he's had. He's had the best car in Formula One since Miami. He's had the best, I think, series of upgrades. McLaren's upgrades generally have been mega. And even if McLaren win the Constructors' title, there's going to be a bit of an empty feeling. But they can't rest yet, because if they keep dropping the ball like this, who knows what happens in Abu Dhabi. That Constructors' duel is still going on. So there is still a bit of a title fight going on. It's just not for the driver's title, the one everyone cares about. So the Constructors' title, the one that the teams care about. The other
And
McLaren driver...
Quickly on Piastri, exactly. I know that you were going to get onto that. He's been a bit disappointing lately, right? I know that you are one of his, not critics, just a bit
skeptics.
You're a bit of a doubter, yeah. And I think you your thoughts have come true recently, because he hasn't been quite on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because Piastri is pretty inconsistent still, in my opinion. He seems to have pace, but he doesn't show it regularly. Okay, and it's his second season, and I've always said that a good driver, usually by their third season, has the breakout. You know, I usually say if it takes more than that, there's something going on. That's either they're overhyped or they're not committed. And so he has one more season, I think, to really prove himself as a superstar, in my books. But his race was, he was behind Lando, but he finished ahead because Lando got the penalty. If I'm thinking about, the fact that he lost out to Leclerc at the start, but then he got Leclerc back right at the safety car restart, and then he pitted when that debris on the track first appeared. But then the safety car came out one lap later. So the timing of his pit stop meant that he lost that place back to Leclerc again. So he was a bit unlucky not to be second today. I think the FIA's delay in calling out the safety car, which we all spoke about earlier, a bizarre call by the FIA, to say the least, cost Piastri quite badly today and helped Ferrari. And Norris dropped the ball, so McLaren came away with far less points than they should have. But if Piastri has to be on this kind of form next week, they really need him to back up Norris, or at least lead the way in Abu Dhabi. He can't have one of his off weekends that he's so often had this year, hasn't he?
Yeah, I can see why McLaren would be aggrieved, because the thing is they could have taken the title at this race, the Constructors' title, but obviously didn't. Yeah, I don't remember seeing much of Piastri in the race. I mean, in the sprint, he was given the win by Lando right at the end as repayment for Sao Paulo, so that balances the books, so fair enough. And yeah, it was just kind of quiet. And myself as well, having had to look at his results more closely for an upcoming video, it's like it isn't actually as impressive as it looks. Particularly when you consider how bad and underperforming Lando has been for most of the year, that he hasn't been getting demolished by Piastri. And he's had a couple of very good races, in particular his win in Baku, but otherwise there's been a lot where he's just slower than Lando and not really doing much.
You know what's been shocking, Peter, and Nav pointed to this earlier, he's been outqualified by Lando in like 13 of the last 14 races. That's not good. Like you're a
Especially as
young
Piastri is a
driver.
good qualifier. We know Lando is very fast, but Piastri, he in Formula 3 and Formula 2, he was, I mean, he was basically the Charles Leclerc number 2 in terms of Mr. Saturday, in terms of pure pace. Piastri had very high credentials in Formula 2. He's the only driver ever to get 4 or 5 pole positions in a row or something. But yeah, as you said, I don't know, he's not beating Lando. And sometimes he's getting beaten quite badly, 2 or 3 times.
His time on his side. He'll have another year to prove himself. I'm expecting a big breakout year by him next year. If he doesn't break out next year, I wouldn't expect fans. I wouldn't think that fans should expect much more. Like if you don't see, like, and people say, "Oh, Mika Hakkinen." Like Mika Hakkinen was fast. He just wasn't in a good car earlier on, so it was mass. Everybody knew how quick he was. I've seen that argument, like, "Oh, it took Mika how many years to win the title?" That winning a title is not the same as showing speed, right? So if Piastri still next year is getting absolutely demolished in qualifying, then I wouldn't expect him to improve that much for the duration of his career. I could be completely wrong, but that's how my personal rule of watching Formula One since '97. I would say 3 seasons is like the development period, and if they don't show that potential in the 3 seasons, you can safely assume that either they were overhyped or they just won't reach the expectations that you're setting for them. But we'll see. We'll see. He's clearly talented. This was not a good season, as we all have noted for him. So his stock has dropped. It's up to him to race it now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he knows this, and the team knows this. That next year he's probably going to be fighting for the title with Lando because Red Bull are not. It's unlikely Red Bull are going to be in that fight. And Mercedes, I seriously doubt it. Ferrari, who knows, with the dynamic between Leclerc and Hamilton. So yeah, if he wants to take that title, he's really going to have to step up.
Let me put it this way: I think Alpine are kicking themselves more that they couldn't hold on to Alonso than they are that they lost Piastri at this stage. I don't think anyone at Alpine is thinking, wow, we really messed up that young talent contract. Look at how good he is. I think that actually, a lot of people at Alpine are like, yeah, that wasn't handled properly. But I don't think Gasly is that much of a downgrade, if at all, to Piastri right now. Bringing Colapinto on or Doohan maybe is just as exciting as bringing on someone like Piastri, who hasn't been performing. I mean, I think, if anything, it just tells you how stupid Alpine were that they were thinking of maybe replacing Alonso with Piastri or not re-signing Alonso, because Fernando Alonso is way ahead of Oscar Piastri right now as a driver. There's just no doubt about
Funnily,
it.
with Ocon being announced out today, Alpine have now lost their entire roster that was announced at the start of early 2022. So they are all gone in a 3-year turnover.
I mean, if Piastri had stayed at Alpine, could we have seen round 3 of Alonso at McLaren? Do you think he would have tried it, seeing that the car's better, or would they have been like, "Nah, you're all right"?
Yeah,
would have tried, but I don't think they would have.
We don't need your negative energy here again. Actually, was Zach Brown leading it when Alonso was there? That was wasn't it Eric Boulier at the time?
It was
18.
both. It was Brown came in 17, right? Or 17 or 18, Zach Brown came in.
Yeah.
And then before that was Eric Boulier and Ron Dennis. And
I think he might have said no, because Zach Brown, he seems to be like the Leonardo DiCaprio of team owners. He's like, no, if you're over 25, I'm not interested. Sorry, like.
Yeah, I mean, Zach Brown, I have my thoughts about him. I'll maybe not go down that rabbit hole today, but I think Fernando Alonso is somebody that every team would look at, but at McLaren, I just feel like he has, like, I think Zach would bring him back, because I think Zach is just somebody who seems to be, pretty focused on bringing in drivers that he thinks are popular and can help him win. I'm just glad that didn't happen, because I don't think Alonso deserved that chance. He really has hurt McLaren a lot. despite his brilliant driving talent. So I don't think it would have been nice to see Alonso winning in a McLaren. I know Nav is probably like thinking, "What are you talking about?" But I just don't. I'm. It's not. One thing is if Alonso went back to Alpine, the team that and Stone, the team that he like ran Formula One over 2 years with, steamrolled everybody with. But if he had started winning with McLaren after everything he had done, yeah, I would have just been like sick to my stomach because he
That would
really
have
has
been
not.
funny. Sorry, can you
It would
imagine
have been
after
ridiculous. It would have been
all the
ridiculous.
2007 shenanigans, then 2015 shenanigans, then 2018
Just like
shenanigans, and then he becomes a champion with them?
I mean, to be
in the-
honest,
yeah.
I mean, it shows his longevity that when it comes to bad blood, like all the 2007 stuff, there's almost nobody left from that era that's still in the team other than probably a couple
Even
of mechanics.
as mechanics or engineers, like
Yeah,
they're all
yeah,
gone.
that's the thing. There's almost no. It's not like Ron Dennis is still running the place. It's like, what the fuck are you doing here? And even 2015, you know, there's no Honda anymore. Zach Brown, Andrea Stella, they're not from that time. There are going to be people that remember him, but it's a completely revamped team. It's the same factory, but everything else is different. So it's not like he's coming into a bunch of people that hate him. So he theoretically could have done it. It would have just been funny because it's like, oh yeah, third time's a charm. Let's see if
It's funny because
well,
you're talking about it like Theseus's ship, where all the parts were disassembled, and is it the same ship? If
Yeah.
you're just joining a McLaren with different
I
members.
mean, it would have been entertaining also just see him up against Lando, like.
But I think
Yeah.
everyone agrees that Alonso in this McLaren this year wins it. He wouldn't have gotten poles like Lando, I don't think so, but I'm pretty sure in the races he would have, just by sheer consistency, done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms
I
of
think he would
intellect,
have-
yeah. In terms of intellect, he's probably the only driver that can really match up to Verstappen at the moment. Like,
I don't think Alonso
Yeah.
would get into crashes. Like that, he would get into controversy, but he would not just like, if Verstappen's pushing him out, he wouldn't have just crashed. Or if he would have crashed, he would have just been on Verstappen's level. But anyway, that we know Alonso's never getting into a title race again. Let's not feed into delusions.
We don't know that. I mean, if he sticks around and Newey builds a rocket ship in 26, who knows? I don't even want to think about that. But the thing is that with him, it's so confusing because I think his head drops. That's why he had that little patch this year where he was nowhere. And I remember in 2010, Eric Boulier was saying in Renault that mechanics were disappointed with Alonso in 2009 because the moment he realized the car was bad, he kind of gave up.
And I agree with you. I think he does that. I think no one can argue against that.
But that doesn't mean he's lost it. That's just how he's always been. The guy is still clearly, he drove a blinder of a race, even though he made some mistakes. He dragged Aston into the points and did a phenomenal job yet again. I think Lewis is not also being helped.
Let's officially open this as Aston Martin then. So yeah, keep going on.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to talk about Ferrari, but we can just touch on Aston quickly because I think that with Aston this weekend, Alonso was dropping places in the first few laps, right? And he was complaining. And then he ran wide through the gravel, and he was really lucky that he got away with rejoining that track in front of a Haas. That should have been a penalty, but he got away with it. But then after that, it's like suddenly the car started to come to him. He calmed himself down. The old Alonso kind of came back, the Alonso we know. And he just started rising through the field. And I was watching him through the race, just seeing him like an elevator, just rise through that lap time. That standings counter. And other drivers were crashing. Other drivers were making mistakes. And just typical Fernando managed to avoid all of that.
He
and
didn't get a
did
single
amazing job.
track limits infringement, and he was every other one got at least 2. Somehow he stayed on track for all of it. So
he ran. Yeah, I mean, he should have gotten the penalty in my opinion at the beginning. He went through the gravel and then somehow just rejoined right in front of the Haas. I mean, that's borderline. It's borderline. But then after that, like you say, Naf, he completely was basically flawless, and he scored 7th place. So that's incredible.
in a car that's terrible, by the way. That car, the last few races. I mean, I think for the last the 4 races before that, so until Singapore, 3-4 races, Aston were the only team with Sauber to not have scored any points. They were literally slower than Sauber in Brazil, and Vegas was also shambolic. So yeah, when I saw him get into Q3, I was like, that is not normal. Genuinely, I think that was one of his best laps on a Saturday this season, because he shouldn't have gotten there, and he did a great job during the race as well. Did a great job. So that was nice to see, because Aston they have been really bad. We know about Dan Fallow's out, and they're gonna hopefully be better next season, even though they're not going to be developing the car. Lance Stroll, though, it's a weird one, because he was starting, as we know, to come alive during the mid part of the season, where Alonso seemed to not care much, and then he goes on and well, in Vegas there was this really funny moment where he qualifies 20th, and the commentators were like, "Oh, Stroll is on a great lap. He's going green in all sectors. This is certainly not going to be last." And then, oh, it's last. And then lap one yesterday, crashes into Albon. Albon says, "I knew that was going to happen." In quali, he blocks Lawson. Lawson thinks it's Alonso. Turns out it's Stroll. So yeah, that's the thing with Lance. He keeps getting those purple patches in a season where you think finally, after 5, 6, 7, 8 seasons, he's improving, but he just doesn't, and he's back to his antics every single time, and I don't get that.
So yeah, I'm not really sure why Julian Palmer said that this was a racing incident during one of the broadcasts. I had both running, and I know that like our producer, for example, thinks that this was a racing incident, and that maybe you guys may have a different view, but it's just typical Lance. He just understeered into the side of Alex. You can look at, and he even admitted he found understeer and he couldn't control it mid corner. Well, sorry, but like you always do this, Lance. Like you always make some kind of silly contact with somebody, and I'm just so fed up with it, because it's he doesn't really pay the price. There's no deterrence. He's I don't think he's Formula One material.
It's his 8th season. 8.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's just annoying that there's going to be no consequences because his dad runs the team, whereas other drivers are being held to such impeccably high standards of conduct and behavior, and he can get away with more or less anything and has immunity effectively.
Yeah. So I don't even think about Lance anymore. It's just he can do whatever he wants, and he'll have a contract, and I don't think his father will ever fire him. I think their goal, and this is what's going to be interesting to me, if that Aston, now this is a thought experiment, if that Aston is quick in 2026, and it's Stroll versus Alonso for the title, I will put down everything I own that suddenly Fernando Alonso's car is going to start exploding. And are going to be loose wheel nuts. There's going to be a damaged floor. There's going to be like powder in his fuel cell. Whatever you can think of. It's my opinion. It's an outrageous one to some. I think they would. There's no way Lawrence Stroll will allow another driver to beat his son to a title in a straight fight with just 2 Aston drivers. And I'll put that out there as the only chance that Lance would ever have to win a title would be if they build a rocket ship that has no equals in 2026, or in one of those years with Newey. So
I think
I'm afraid of.
If it came to that, they would probably just get rid of Alonso to take that threat away and put in someone meek and mild like Jack Crawford, who's not gonna bother him much and play the number 2 or whatever.
I think we would genuinely see like a mid-season switch out of nowhere, like a very dodgy or even bike accident. Should we even go there?
I mean, both of them have had a lot of accidents, haven't they? Off track, like before seasons and everything.
Exactly. So you would hear that Alonso during the summer break got involved in a biking accident on the Spanish mountains, and he can't do the. I know this is like pure speculation and also just sabotage, but they would have to find a way to get rid of him. If there's a rocket ship, they would have to. Maybe they try to convince Alonso to do Le Mans, because Aston is at Le Mans now. So they're like, yeah, go on at Le Mans, and they actually just sabotage the Le Mans car to like fly over like Mark Webber's car did, and then he crashes into the trees or something.
I mean,
which is-
he's already won Le Mans, so that they might throw him at Indy again if he wants that triple crown.
yeah. Well,
Yeah, it's absolutely one of the most interesting thought experiments I can think of, because I just think about it. Think about all the billions that Lawrence Stroll has poured into this team. You really think he's going to let Fernando Alonso take away his dream of seeing his son world champion? Like, do we really think that Lawrence Stroll is going to sit there and be like, yeah, my son came second, and I let it happen, and Fernando Alonso is my preference to win the title over my son? No way. Like, Alonso is going to, and I actually think that would be total chaos, because Alonso will not go away quietly if he has a title-winning car. And anyways, this is pure speculation, but I will yeah, basically stop there, and we can transition maybe to Ferrari. Nav.
Ferrari they were still in the title race for teams, but I think they'll be disappointed because Sainz got very unlucky. Leclerc was fast, but didn't beat. I mean, he got second, right? Oh, fourth.
Fourth? No,
Fourth,
sixth.
yeah, so he
No, sixth. He had the puncture, didn't he?
Yeah, he came sixth, and yeah, he had a messy race in general. He had a puncture. He had to do the entire
Leclerc finished
lap with a
sixth.
flat tire.
What did Sainz finish? Seventh?
No, sorry, Sainz was
Leclerc was
fourth.
second. Leclerc was
Exactly.
No,
Leclerc
he
was
was.
no.
Yeah, he was
Leclerc was
sixth.
second. Sainz was sixth.
Yeah,
Sainz
exactly.
was
Yeah,
sixth because he had to do that puncture. He had to do the
exactly.
entire lap with a puncture, right? So he
Yeah.
also was just like not his best in general. I didn't think Sainz had a strong
Ferrari's
race.
pace just wasn't there to across the weekend. If you consider, well, we're trying to see if we can snatch the constructors' title, and they just didn't have the pace. But the race was so back to front that they kind of made it work anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one because they were in a stronger position, and then Sainz had his issues. They had some luck. I mean, Leclerc did a really good job to beat a McLaren, and I think that came from the timing of the safety car. Otherwise, I think if Carlos didn't have that puncture, I think they could have finished second and third. That's how good they were, and they're only 21 points behind going into the final race, but they're going to need to maximize everything in that race. It's still possible. So, frankly speaking, they have a good car. It's not far off McLaren, and these drivers clearly know how to manage a race, manage their pace and bring it home. And I actually think Abu Dhabi will suit the Ferrari car a little better than Qatar does as well. So it's going to be an interesting one. I think McLaren will win the constructors title, but it's not a guarantee at all. If I had to make a prediction, I'll say McLaren, but Ferrari have a better driver lineup, and their cars should be pretty fast around Abu Dhabi. So that's going to be the main headline. Who's going to win the constructors? And it's up in the air right now.
Just to put numbers on it, so if Ferrari get a 1-2 and McLaren get a 3-5, that's when they win it. Or if both McLaren retire and yeah, then it's easier. But yeah, no, so 1-2 for Ferrari, 3-5 for McLaren. So let's say basically they would need to see McLaren be the third fastest car. Because then they can get a 1-2, Max gets third, and McLaren get 4-5. The other thing is Leclerc can still get P2 in the standings. So Leclerc, if he wins with fastest lap, then he is second in the standings. So, and I think that would be incredible if Lando did not finish second in the standings. Which, winning with fastest lap is not. It's not an impossible feat for Ferrari on a random race. So let's see.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. At the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of anticipation around that. The other team that we haven't spoken about is Mercedes. They're not really in the fight for the constructors, but they have a fast car now. They're regularly fighting with McLaren and Ferrari, so they could be the fly in the ointment for one of those teams getting in the way. And my thoughts about Mercedes are keep it brief. I think the team had a fast car, but their drivers just didn't maximize the car itself, in my opinion. The car runs well when they can run it low and stiff, and that's what they did. But George still finished only fourth, so that wasn't a great result at all, in my opinion, given that he started on pole. And then I think on top of that, Hamilton had a horrible race. So, I mean, he got dinged for a false start, and then he started speeding in the pit lane. Overall, I can't really say that Mercedes should be happy with this result because they had a car to do a little bit more than that, probably. But ultimately speaking, the drivers weren't exactly perfect today, and that cost them. But they have, they have a lot of opportunities to finish out the season strongly in Abu Dhabi. The car is fast.
In some very random breaking news, Bernie Eccleston has put his entire F1 car collection on auction right now, which includes like 70 machines and 40 Ferraris, old Brabhams, old Lotuses. I don't know why it's on auction. I don't know what he's trying to finance, but it's worth more than £500 million, and that is news from now. So interesting.
Well, knowing him, he's either got a very expensive court case or some very expensive alimony to pay coming up that he's worried about. Yeah, I don't know why he would do all of that unless he wasn't interested in putting it in his will and giving it to his children.
He's selling all 70.
Jody Scheckter did that this year. He sold all of his cars at auction, which I thought was a great shame because he collected almost every car he raced with, and now they've all been sold and distributed elsewhere. That's interesting news.
And yeah, Lewis just hasn't been on it for a while now, and I think even the thing is his fans are defending him a lot and saying there's a lot going on to the car, but we're seeing gaps that we didn't see before. I know he just had a really, really good race in Las Vegas, and that's fantastic for him. But I need to stress this because Ciaron has mentioned it too many times. Park the car, mate. Lewis said park the car, mate, to Bono very clearly. And just to make it very clear, that's not the first time he said it. Spain 2022, he asked to retire the car when he was last. And what happens? He finishes fifth, one of his best races all season, P20 to P5, because he had crashed, I think. So he had gone back to the back of the field. That's twice, at least, from memory, where he has asked to retire the car. So, Ciaron, what do you think about it as someone who has slated other drivers for wanting to retire the car sneakily?
Yeah, except he didn't. He wanted to, but it didn't. And
no, but Bono,
he wasn't lying about it.
They prevented him to. They prevented him from.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's never good to do that. We know Lewis is wildly emotional. Like, he'll just say things that are just totally unnecessary and a function of the fact that he's stressed out, and then he regrets it and then takes it back like a week later, saying like, "Oh yeah, like, I'm glad we didn't do that." I'm like, okay. So he really is still quite an emotional human being and driver, even in this stage in his career. And I think that's why he said that. My problem is Fernando Alonso lying that like there's an engine problem and he just parks the car. Like, that's pure arrogance. And I get it. You're Fernando Alonso. You're big time. You're the man. You dethroned Michael Schumacher, right? Except you didn't, anyways. So the thing is that that and what Jensen was doing too. Jensen admitted that him and Fernando would like park the car sometimes when it was perfectly healthy. Like, Lewis wanted to do that out of frustration, but it was much more transparent, and in the end, it didn't happen. So it's a little different to me, but neither are good. And I think Lewis is just wildly emotional, I found it interesting that Total Wolf said that this generation of cars aren't suiting Lewis Hamilton's driving style because Lewis likes to be aggressive on corner entry, and the car at the moment can't take that, especially on qualifying laps. That was very, very transparent by Total. So there's definitely an element of setup and driving style here that's hurting Lewis. Not just that he's getting older. So if Ferrari can find the right setup and give Lewis what he wants, we may see a resurgence yet with Lewis Hamilton. I am not ready to just say Lewis is over the hill quite yet, because like Fernando, Lewis has a very wide operating window and he's relentless. So I'm not ruling those two out yet until I see a longer sustained period of mediocrity. And even though this season has been poor for Lewis, he's going to be beaten by George, I believe. He's still a top driver and he's still mega in the races, and I'm not ruling him out. So that's my take on Mercedes. They got it together in the end this season, didn't they? But way too late in the season. So they have to start at this level next season, and then I think they can expect some good results.
So with Mercedes, it seems that they, based on Vegas, they enjoy low temperature, low grip conditions. And I guess the hope was that it would be similar here, even though it was oppressively hot last year. It was quite a lot cooler this time, but still enough to, I think, help them anyway, because by looking at George's pace, you would say there's nothing wrong with the car for him to nominally get pole. And yeah, I mean, he had that 7-second pit stop and then came out behind a train of 4 cars, so that really disrupted his pace. And it didn't affect his final position, but there was the penalty for falling too far behind the safety car. But he could have very easily been on the podium otherwise. Lewis, though, yeah, as great as his race pace was in Vegas, he threw away an easy win with his qualifying mistakes. And then this time, after qualifying, like at first he was saying, maybe I just don't have it anymore. And then and then after qualifying, he was like, well, no, I do. It's just the car's not going any faster. And it's like, you say that, your teammate's on pole while you're, 7th or 8th or whatever. And then in the race, yeah, he did a jump start, which I think might be the first ever jump start he's done. I can't think of any others in his career. When it comes to speeding in the pit lane, like the limit is 80 kilometers an hour. Apparently, he was clocked at 106, so that's quite a severe infringement on that. And then yeah, there was the puncture. I mean, him and Sites the punches, because that's what the 3rd year in a row now that people have gotten punctures in Qatar, or the 3rd race in a row. It seems to be well, maybe they were only last year, but there were threats to them, which is why we had that mandatory 3-stop race and all of that changes to the curbs. This time, although I think this time it was because of the wing mirror. So yeah, just not good for him. And again, talking about wanting to retire the car and that, he's obviously demoralized, and a lot of people, I mean, some people it rubs them the wrong way that he kind of just wants to give up as soon as things aren't going his way. And it's like, maybe that's because he's been conditioned for, well, up until 2022 to be running at the front all the time. And so it just doesn't, he's not used to running, outside of the points and near the back and everything else working. And even we would see, even then he would get very kind of bitchy, I guess, on the radio in races he wasn't winning, even if he was just running in second and being beaten by Vettel or Bottas whoever. That he's just not really used to having to do this. But again, the balance of power has changed. He's the outgoing driver. He probably isn't being so involved in technical discussions. He kept hinting about missing these last 2 races. He's still going to do Abu Dhabi, but also I think contractually he probably has to, because again, he's doing the postseason tests with them. There's a few other sponsorship things they have to do before he's let go, and he can then join Ferrari.
I totally agreed on all of that. I have nothing to add to that. The only other time I can remember him maybe being accused of jumping a start was Brazil in 2023. But I don't think he ever got a penalty for it. So, yeah, it was odd. I think everything you said is contributing to his form. But like I said, I don't think he's out for the count yet. I think he can have a career resurgence. You just got to hope that he doesn't get totally demolished by Charles in the first part of 2025. He has to somehow find a way to keep some momentum, because Charles is going to have such a head start in that team. I just worry that if he gets beaten by Charles, he won't ever have the confidence to fight back. But he's still a very good driver, and I do think he's the gap between him and George is exaggerated right now, just like Ocon and Gasly is exaggerated. and we'll see that next season. Speaking
Well,
about Gaz, okay, Nav, go ahead.
one more thing. So to close on Hamilton, yesterday was the anniversary of his 20 years of racing with a Mercedes engine in his car. So I think for 20 years in a row since 1st of December 2004, he raced with a Merc engine. Obviously, GP2 shouldn't count, so I don't know why they're including that.
No,
into...
it's 20 years since he first drove a car with a Mercedes engine because he tested the MP419 in 2004.
But some people have phrased it as that has been his association with Mercedes.
Well, the
Because-
association with Mercedes goes back to 1998 when he
Yeah.
joined the Young Driver program.
That's the weird one. I guess they're talking Mercedes Formula One or something.
Yeah, his
But-
first 20 years of him driving Formula One cars, his first test in a Formula One car. Yeah.
So yeah, that was something yesterday. But moving on to Alpine, as Ciaron said, we touched upon most of their issues, but on track they really delivered with Gasly. Again, Gasly getting into Q3. Yes, did he get into Q3? No. He just missed out on Q3. He qualified 11th, and then a really good race to finish 5th, and that builds up on his previous good results. As I said, over the last 3 races, he has more points than Lando. And, it's showing that in terms of pace, they have improved, at least. There is something going on in that pesky French team.
Yeah.
Obviously, Ocon, I think, is getting kind of not given a damn about. But Gasly is showing that he's still got some shades of 2021 Gasly in him.
Yeah, his job of defensive drive against Sainz was amazing because he had hard tires on, and he had to keep Sainz in a much quicker Ferrari all the way behind them all the way to the finish line, and that was, in conjunction with managing tires, fuel saving. That was a very mature drive by Pierre, and he keeps Alpine in 6th in the constructors as a result. So, 2 things can be true. I think Alpine are not treating Ocon properly, and I think Ocon his gap to Gasly is not this. But at the same time, I also think Gasly is driving probably the best I've ever seen him drive in Formula One recently. So, that's good for Alpine. I think next year they're going to have a clear team leader in Pierre. So, he's got to keep this up, and who knows where he ends up in the future. So. It's been a really good end to the season for Pierre. There's nothing else to add
So
on that, I think.
On Pierre, do you guys think he's ever going to get back into a top team? Because one of my hot takes from last night was that he's going to have a Checo/Fisichella path to his career, and in 3 or 4 years, he's going to get 1 season in a top team, and he's going to get smashed by whoever is in that team at that point. I don't know if that would be Antonelli or whoever.
So someone needs to break the cycle of mid-Frenchmen driving for mid-teams. We need to put him in a Ferrari or something and just see what happens. It can't just be Prost that was good. There has to be someone
forget
else.
every time that Gasly drove for Red Bull because it was such a weird small phase and it was so, in the end, because of everything that happened at Red Bull since, it sounds wrong to think about, but yeah, he drove there and he was terrible.
So
Yeah, only 12
he
races
was.
with them.
But guys, that's my point. To your first point, Peter, the last time we had 2 Frenchmen in a Ferrari, I think was 83.
Yeah.
Tambay and Arnoux, and they should have won that title. Because I actually, my thesis on 1983 is that Ferrari had the quickest car that season. I mean, Tambay had how many pole positions? And at the same time, a lot. And what Arnoux finished? Arnoux and Tambay finished 3rd and 4th. Arnoux just 10 points behind PK in the standings at the end of the season. That car was the quickest car. They took
the constructors. I mean, what's his face was useless. Wasn't Patrese PK's teammate, and he basically cost him the
Exactly.
Mm.
So I don't know if anyone wants that again. But back to present day, I think with Gasly, part of the reason I don't think he'll ever go back to Red Bull or a top team is because it wasn't just that he was slow. Didn't he get into verbal confrontations with Adrian Newey and other engineers at Red Bull. That is a huge reason he was let go.
That's
Because-
interesting. I didn't hear that, but
Oh
I-
yeah, big time.
I'm told he wasn't very good on the technical side. Like in practice sessions, he wasn't very good at articulating what needed changing on setup and stuff like that. But I don't
that's
know.
the French side. No, I'm joking.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he got into arguments. Like he was literally just having like standoffs with Marco and Nui, and they were basically telling him like, "Forget it. You can't act like this." And that's something that any team looks at. That's a red flag for any team. Like they don't want a driver like that.
I mean,
And I think, yeah,
I mean, the last teammate that beat him was Verstappen. Every other teammate he's had since then, he's beaten them. So he has
They've not exactly been.
no.
The teammates haven't exactly been generational
But
drivers.
still, it's something. I mean, if people are gonna
it's something. Yeah,
if people are gonna suck Albon's dick over him beating Gotifi and Captain America, then we need to do the same with Gasly beating Tsunoda and a severely
Yeah.
washed Kvyat and and then Ocon.
I think Gasly's stock has risen the past 2 years, but not by a massive amount. He really needs to keep performing well and hope that somebody gives him a second chance because he
Did he
really
beat
did.
Ocon?
He beat Ocon by like 2 points last year.
Mm.
So
He was amazing. He was
has-
amazing in 21.
Yeah. So he's good. He just really ruined his reputation when he went to Red Bull because it wasn't just that he was slow. It was like you don't know how to set up a car. You're getting into arguments with Adrian Newey. You seem overrated. Nobody likes you. Now you have to rebuild your entire career, man. Like that's what he's doing. So if he keeps doing this, who knows? Because he's still relatively young. But my goodness, he really, to me, he will never get back into a top team. But who knows? If he keeps beating all his teammates, like you mentioned, it is possible. I just I think he's still a ways away from that. There are other options, and it's not easy to just like forget a season like he had against Verstappen, where there were so many things that went wrong. So that's my take on it.
Well, after 3 races, I remember we thought, would there be any teams that would go pointless this season? And the first conclusion was that Alpine are definitely gonna find their way. That's for sure. I mean, you're a factory team. They know what they're doing. Deep down, they know how to build a car that gets the lower points. But one team that we were really not sure would get any opportunities, never mind points, was a Sauber, stake, kick, whatever. And actually, I really think we did them some injustice here. We should have mentioned them much earlier because I'd say they were the talk of the town yesterday. Zhou Guanyu, I don't want to say my boy because he isn't my boy at all. I just think he has been a bit disrespected because he's not that bad. He's bad. He's obviously one of the slowest drivers on the grid, and Bottas has shown him up this year. But I always said he's just a fine driver. He's just a like lower mid driver who finds himself in an F1 seat in literally the most competitive era of all time. So, yeah, 4 points for Zhou. And the insane thing is, yes, there were a lot of DNFs, but he genuinely drove a perfect race. He couldn't have done anything better. So, what was your take?
Yeah, I mean, the pace was the car was kind of mid-card in terms of pace because they both made it into Q2, and again, the same thing happened last week in Vegas because they brought in this upgrade package, which maybe they should have brought in 6 months ago at this rate. So on pace, not enough for points, but then the safety car happened. He pitted well. Their pit stops didn't last for 2 hours, so that was good. And he just kind of kept on. He was on the right tyres at the end, and he just kind of held it and kept 8th, which is matching his best ever result. And then Bottas that was interesting because he ran over the wing mirror and then damaged his underfloor, caused the safety car because then those the things came, what are they called? Pit punchers came, and he got hit. He also got hit by Lawson at the start, so I think he had damage from that too. So he was just about hanging on, but there was a point where it looked like he was in 10th and he was gonna get a point. And I was like, all of a sudden, I'm rooting for Sauber and friggin' Bottas, and I was there watching it, just going, no, get fucked, Albon, screw you, Lando, because they could see they were coming through and trying to get him, and but he was like 4 seconds a lap slower than Lando, so he was never going to hold on to that. Otherwise, we would have seen Sauber suddenly getting double points. But Joe, if he finishes 9th in Abu Dhabi, then he ends up matching his previous 2 seasons in terms of points. Or if he finishes higher than 9th, he ends up having his best ever season in the final 2 races.
Yeah, that was the best ever drive I've seen from. That was Zhou Guanyu's best ever drive. Period. He didn't even look like. I thought there was somebody else in there. Like I thought that was like Esteban Ocon or somebody like that.
He even overtook someone. Like there was an overtake on Tsunoda. Like an actual.
It was a good overtake too, and he was clean. So I don't understand like what he ate for breakfast or something. Like the guy was just on it today. So, and Bottas actually helped with the result because remember he actually pitted early, didn't he? And so that allowed Sauber to gather data on those hard tires, and then when they put the hard tires on Joe, he was sensational on them. He managed them so well. He had such pace on them, and that kind of decided the race for him. And I think Bottas would have been right there with him had he not run over that debris, as you mentioned. Ultimately, I think Joe is going to look as if he's better than Bottas in the standings, and this was an amazing performance. I really don't know where this came from. Like it's just so random that suddenly he puts in basically a masterclass. But he's had an awful season. Okay, let's get back to reality here. He had a terrible season. He's been totally demolished by Valtteri in qualifying, and he's been nowhere in the races. Like you said, Peter, he overtook someone. When was the last time he did that?
I think he overtook someone at Kota when he was also having a good race, and then to quote Peter, he spun because he felt bad that he was doing well. So
exactly.
Or he realised, I'm not in last. I'm not 40 seconds behind my team. I need to spin and correct it.
Yeah. So I mean, he's had a horrible season, if that's the way we're characterizing it, and this is way too little, too late. Like this should have been how he was driving from the first race of the season. And I'm seeing people in the YouTube comment sections on the internet saying, "Oh, look how much potential Joe has." And I'm saying, no, that's not how it works. Yeah. So one good race does not suddenly blanket everything else you've done. So no, I still think they're making the right decision by sacking him. He's driven horribly this season, but he drove extremely well in this race, and maybe that will help him secure a seat or some role in Formula One somewhere for next season, because he hasn't shown enough to be there as a main driver, but he could still be a reserve driver somewhere, and maybe that's the way he can weasel his way back into Formula One.
But in the end,
the future.
his tenure in Formula One, I think, was better than what most expected. Obviously, 2024 was really bad, but if you look at it as a whole, I think most people would have expected the first Chinese driver, like most older fans or in general would have expected the first Chinese driver to just be a terrible pace driver who is always 10 seconds off the pace. And in the end, he got some points, and he was never disgustingly bad. I mean, again, there were some races where he was absolutely nowhere this year, but there was no UGE day situation. And I think that in that sense, he will be happy with his time, and yet another season where everyone scores a few points. And the thing is, no one expected Sauber to score an 8th when they eventually score. They thought it would be a dodgy 10th, but it was an 8th where they had a chance at double points. If not for Lando actually serving his stop-go penalty as quickly as he did, they could have had both cars in the points.
Yeah, that team still has a lot of work to do, and this was a very good weekend for them, so they need to study it and take the lessons that they've learned into the next season, because this was decent performance, but again, too little too late. So other teams like Haas have done a better job this season in terms of just being a little bit more consistent. that's not saying much because Alpha have been terrible. Sorry, not Alpha. Sauber have been awful. Actually, if we're going to talk about Alpha and we're going to talk about Guan Yu Zhou, I mean, would you have signed him knowing what you know now back in 2022 over Giovinazzi? No, probably not. Like, if I had to say, like, Raikkonen, Bottas, Giovinazzi, Zhou, who's been the worst of that four since this whole new era of Sauber? You got to say, like, Joe still looks like the worst of those four. So
I think it's Joe is the worst driver, but as a package, I can see why they went for Joe over Giovinazzi because Giovinazzi was bringing basically nothing in sponsors,
sure,
and especially at least when they were Alpha, Giovinazzi, Alpha Italian, very nice. But as soon as Alpha went, and I can genuinely see why they did that because yes, Giovinazzi is faster than Joe. I don't think anyone would say no to that, but the differential, is not like a 40-point differential between them. So I think that's what happened. And yeah, in the end, over the last 5 races, Joe has scored 4 times more points than Checo, which is incredible.
So Nav, if let's say you're the team boss of Hick Sauber, okay? Your team boss. Who would you sign in that team? Would you have re-signed Joe?
For next year?
What's your take? Yeah.
Oh, no,
Would you have re-signed Joe?
I would not have signed Joe for this season.
Okay.
I think 2 seasons is very fair for this kind of driver. He did well in 22, 23. His pace was going on. Joe should not have been there in 2024. 2024 was meant to be, and I know you won't like this, but if they were a team with integrity, which they obviously don't because kickstake, whatever, but if they had some integrity, they would have put Théo Pourchaire in that car just because that was the gap. I know you don't rate that, but put the bias aside. Your academy has a guy who's a Formula 2 champion and who was very highly rated. There's this Chinese driver who got you attention and money for 2 seasons. You have a slot between Joe leaving and Audi taking over. You try to have some integrity and you put your academy driver, who's literally the best academy driver you've had in like 20 years. But they didn't do that. And that's where I think they really missed an opportunity, and Porsche is never going to get any other chance. But yeah, that's my goal. I would have put Porsche next to Bottas, and Porsche would have had 1 season. No idea if he would have gotten a second one anywhere, but I think he deserved it at least. That's my goal. Well, you mentioned Haas, who have done a better job than Sauber this season. Well, let's go into them because they had a disappointing Nico Hülkenberg this race. Surprisingly, that the guy who always rises up to the occasion. I made a mistake there. I said weekend. He was really good on Saturday. He scored.
He was 7th in the sprint and Q3, and then it just fell apart afterwards.
Exactly. So 2 points. He scored 2 points, just like K-Mag scored 2 points. K-Mag finished 9th, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2 points for both drivers. He messed up his quali, which is rare. Nico is a good qualifier. But again, 4 points for that team, and they just keep coming. That partnership with Toyota is helping. Komatsu has been brilliant. Ciaron, we haven't had you on a while here, so I wanted to know what you think of Komatsu, because there must be a very clear correlation between the progress and this guy.
Look, I mean, he had a very, unserious act to follow in the sense that he didn't have a very high bar that was set for him with Gunther Steiner. And I think Komatsu's just been somebody that is about the team rather than himself. He doesn't draw undue attention onto himself, and that already, I think, has improved Haas and improved the team's operations. So I'm not sure how good Komatsu is, but he seems a lot better than Steiner. And that's already an improvement. So I think he's good overall because, honestly, that Haas car is quick. And he's done a good job in organizing the team and bringing updates and improving car performance in a way we hadn't really associated with Haas. Haas were known as the circus act. Okay? If they brought an update, Grosjean would smash it up. If they told Magnussen not to crash while they had the Flovis paint, he would trash the car. Like it was just one of those teams that like you watched for comedic value, comedic relief, and now they've turned into a more serious team. And I think they still have a deficit with the drivers. Like I think Kevin Magnussen is way too inconsistent to be in Formula One, even though he drove well this race.
He is out.
And he's out. So next year, I think Ocon and Behrman, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great lineup. Like I think that's going to be a much better lineup for them and in a good direction for them to go into. Regarding the race, I mean Hülkenberg had a crazy race. He hit Ocon, who then hit Colapinto, and then because of that, which was Hülkenberg's fault, he had a rear puncture, and so he dropped to last. And then he spun off by himself after, and had to retire because he was stuck in the gravel. That's pathetic. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's totally pathetic. And Magnussen was fighting with Gasly, but then after Magnussen pitted, Gasly just pumped in those laps, which was amazing to see, right? That's the difference between Gasly and a Magnussen. Gasly has that speed in reserve, and he really showed it. And not only did Gasly jump him, but because he pitted early before that safety car, Fernando Alonso and Guan Yu Zhou also passed him. So after that, he just kind of held on to ninth, which keeps them in touch with Alpine and the constructors, but right now the way things are going, you gotta think that Alpine are the favorites to keep sixth. But it's all to play for. It's not just McLaren versus Ferrari in Abu Dhabi. It's also Haas versus Alpine. And if it wasn't for that safety car, Magnussen would have been probably in that fifth to sixth position area. So what they really need next weekend is just perfect performance from their drivers. No stupid crashes. No slow pit stops. If you want to beat Gasly and Ocon, Gasly and Doohan, you're going to have to do well. And that actually is interesting because Alpine have a lot to lose, yet they still kicked Ocon out for that final race. Isn't that crazy? I just realized that. Like they have to beat Haas next weekend.
It's absolutely crazy. Their fans are going mad about it more than Ocon being disrespected. They're like, you need a driver who could get points. It could be, you could say that anyway, Ocon was not going to get points because of that broken car, but he could have helped, and he would have helped more than Doohan for sure. So
yeah, someone in their first race. Now that I just realized that just talking about this now, because that actually I've changed my thesis based on what we just said here, Nav. I actually think even though they're behind going into that race, if Magnussen and Hülkenberg can have a clean weekend, they have a better chance of scoring more points than Gasly and someone in their first ever F1 race. Huge strategic blunder,
not even that
surely.
Good. Like Doohan is not Lewis Hamilton or Kimi in their first race. It's or Mark Webber. He's like a normal guy,
Yeah, I mean, the teams, they need to dream big as well because, I mean, it's not going to happen, but mathematically, Alpine could take fifth from Aston Martin in Abu Dhabi as well. They only need to score 33 points, and they've got Aston Martin.
33, good number.
Yeah. That's, what is that? That's like what?
That is second and third. That is exactly
second and third, or, that's second and third is... It is second and third. Yeah, okay. Well, they did that, 2 races ago, so, why not?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's Abu Dhabi, so it won't happen, but it's theoretically possible. It's stuff like that you need to think about, that it could be a thing. It is nuts to throw him out, though, with one race to go when they're in this really close title fight, unless they just don't care. The other thing, which I wanted to mention earlier, actually, because we said that he got himself in trouble because Ocon was proud of his Mercedes association. Well, Alpine are becoming a Mercedes customer team in 2 years as well.
Oh yeah.
So why not keep him around for that? Like it's that stuff like that as well. And I thought Famine hated him, but then they got rid of him, and they got in Oaks, and he'd be all right with him, but I guess not. Oaks is always going to be friendly to Doohan because isn't Doohan no. Aaron's the high tech one, not Doohan. Unless
I
he
think
wasn't
Doohan
high
was
tech.
at high tech. No, he
Oh,
was
he
at
probably. I
Trident.
think everyone's been at. I can't keep track of who was at what team in Formula 2 except for Prema drivers, but I think everyone has driven for high tech in one of the lower series at some point. So he probably has in the past.
It's just like I don't know how to explain this. What was Messi's number at Barcelona?
And
Right.
okay. This question will be clipped because
so my point is like I'm being half facetious here, right? You don't just give the number 10 to somebody, right? You don't just give it to any kid because they want it. In hockey, you don't just give Wayne Gretzky's number in any team. Like nobody just wears 99 in hockey. There's Wayne Gretzky's number. There's other numbers like Xavi's number, I'm sure. Like, anyways,
I mean Thierry Henry's number. Like, I know what you mean.
Thierry Henry at Arsenal.
I'm an Arsenal fan. He wore number 14. Okay, fair enough. We had Theo Walcott, who was the up and coming English star at that point. But then we gave number 14 to Eddie Nketiah, and any Arsenal fan listening to this, or actually any Premier League fan listening to this, knows that Eddie Nketiah is the most mid striker of all time, and we gave him 14 just because he was an academy kid. And I think that will tie into what you will say. The 7 is, but 7
so why is Jack Doohan allowed to take Kimi Räikkönen's number?
Because if we're honest, numbers in Formula 1 haven't had the same significance yet. And also, Kimi didn't win with number 7, like a title.
I've always assumed that with this new rule, because when they brought it in, that you can have personalized driver numbers. The idea is that it's unique to you, and that no one else can have that number.
But then after 99 drivers.
Yeah, but you just have 100. You can have put 3 digits on if you want. There's nothing wrong with that, I don't think.
That's ugly.
I mean, you wouldn't mind it. I'm still waiting for someone to go 69. Like, that hasn't happened yet, and I do that in all my games. I'm always driver 69. But
aren't you past the age of 30, Peter?
Yeah, I know, but still, someone has to do it. It's staring them in the face. I like
the 0 number. I like 0. Damon Hill had 0. It's a cool number to have.
You know, Kaye Rovanpera has 69 on his rally car.
Okay.
So if he does make it to Formula 1, which could be happening at some point, he will probably get 69.
Admittedly, I know nothing about WRC, but that I don't.
He's the Max Verstappen. He was driving rally cars at the age of 7.
Because I know that Thierry Neuville just won the title this year in WRC, but the transition. Are there any examples in the past of people actually properly transitioning from rallying to Formula 1 without having already done Formula 1, which is what Kimi had done?
No,
it's. I mean, like Sebastian Loeb, he tested a car once, but
he could have, but the FIA didn't want to. But
it's such a different discipline. Like, it's like we've had drivers go from motorbikes to Formula 1, but that was in the 60s. Like, it's not.
So who was? I'm sure there's someone, but the thing is like because the path is so different, it's often like an obstacle with the licenses, or as Nav said, the FIA blocks it. I don't think there's a skill issue there. I think a lot of those guys started off racing wheel to wheel with other drivers. So it's not like it's a foreign concept for these guys. It's like, oh, well, another driver's next to me. They can quickly adapt to that. And then I think they have the hardest job in the world, racing and motorsport. I think rallying is on par with Formula 1 in that sense. I think Formula 1 is the best motorsport, and I think Formula 1 is the pinnacle. But my goodness, like if you're a good rally driver, you really have a lot of skills. And
I think Vitaly Petrov started with some rallying, but obviously he did.
It was probably some Lada on 3 wheels.
Yeah, it was
on a frozen lake or something.
Yeah, he did Lada Cup, but I think he also did some rally Lada thingy. But then obviously he did GP2 and whatever. So
yeah. It's the thing is, I have no doubts that when it comes to car control, rally drivers are probably unmatched. But it's such a different discipline in terms of how you drive the cars and the physicality that goes into it, that it would take a lot of adjustment in terms of driving style. Because
you've seen the Race of Champions, it's always won by rally drivers.
Yeah, but it's another thing is, do rally drivers, obviously they must start out doing karting, but they don't really do single seaters as juniors, do they? Like they don't.
They don't.
No, so they have no. So that's not going to help you having no single seater.
A lot of them don't do karting either. They just enter. You know, when you're 15, 16, you can just enter a shit car in a rally
Just buy a mini,
competition.
and yeah,
Yeah, a
just-
lot of them haven't actually done karting. Actually,
I mean, the
Yeah.
physical
Yeah.
side of it would be really because the rally stages are quite short individually, but also the G forces and stuff is going to be considerably less. I'm sure. Like you don't have these long sustained 5G corners or anything like that. It's just it would because we saw, for example, how much Brendan Hartley struggled to adjust to Formula One just from coming over from WEC. And he already had experience of being a Red Bull Junior and doing all the single seaters, but he was doing like hypercar racing lines and stuff in a Formula One car and everything. And
Which
rallying,
it was
yeah.
quite funny. There were some clips of him in the first two races where he's just going in a completely different line just because his brain thinks that's what you're meant to do. But yeah,
I mean, maybe 40 years ago, Group B drivers put them because back when you had the turbo cars and you were drifting around corners, it'd be great. But you're going to see them taking cars and putting the back end out in stuff, and it's like that's not how it's meant to be done.
Ciaron, would you have wanted to see Walter Roll in a Williams?
Yeah, I would have. And the thing is like I think these good rally drivers can adapt to it. I mean, Kalle Rovanperä was apparently, pretty impressive in his F1 test recently, F1 car test, and
It was
I
2
think
seconds and a half slower, which is really good, frankly.
yeah,
Mm.
it's not bad. And you see, rally drivers, they have great feel and great skill, the good ones, and that translates to being able to like adapt to different conditions, being able to handle a car
they would be baller in the wet.
in
In
the
F1,
wet.
Yeah.
they would absolutely kill it in
Yeah.
wet conditions, and they'd be like, "Why the
So-
fuck are we red flagging this? Like, can we just go?"
They would
please?
They would
Exactly.
take the Parabolica as a drift.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and they'd be like, "Yeah, I was doing Rally Sweden when there was a blizzard. Why are we stopping this race? Like because
Yeah.
somebody saw a raindrop somewhere." So it's tough. It's a different sport. You're completely right on that. It is completely different, but because of how difficult it is, I do like to see the top ones try Formula One because I think they have shown that they have the skill to do it. It's just, it is a different discipline, and as Callie is finding out, you have to start off maybe one step below and then use that to springboard yourself into Formula One. But I would like to see Kalle Rovanperä in a Formula One car, and I do think the top rally drivers are very close in skill to Formula One drivers. I've always believed that. Like, I've never thought that Walter Roll or Tommy Mäkinen or Sebastian Loeb were inferior in
Carlos Sainz
skill.
Senior.
Carlos
Yeah.
Sainz Sr.,
But
what a driver.
this is
Yeah.
another thing actually, because obviously there's been this thing about trying to get a sprint, like a reserve sprint race, and they decided they couldn't do it in Abu Dhabi over the winter. Why can't we just have a one-off race just for WRC drivers? Like get 10
I
or
love
20
that.
of them, and just have a weekend. They get to do they do their FP1, and then they just race. And because it's the winter, it'll be freezing cold. They won't care. They'll be able to work the tires and just see what happens. If
Just
who's-
more motorsport
'cause-
interchangeability. I think everyone wants that.
I mean, I'm skeptical if it were, but I fully support getting somebody from WRC in a seat in Formula One because I think we need to mix it up a bit in terms of always having this, Frecker to F3 to F2 pipeline going up. It's really like we need to see because we had a little bit. We had what was it? Chembol Massey was an esports driver, and they put him in Formula 2, and he sucked. And then
Mats Esterson is doing weirdly better. Like he did well this weekend somehow, and I don't know how. That
well, no,
happened, 'cause
I
he
mean
was-
we'll get on to F2 in a minute, but that race
Yeah.
was illegitimate as far as I'm concerned. The results were back to front. It's like it's stupid.
That's also
But yeah, you need a bit more different, and like because I mean Valentino Rossi, he's tested F1 cars and he comes from motorbikes. Again, why not see how MotoGP drivers do in Formula One? Again, completely different discipline and completely
I
different way
think
of
they would do
driving.
really
but-
well because they have this thing where they're not scared of speed. I think where the rally drivers could struggle is that you do
Oh, the speed,
get-
yeah.
Yeah, you do get to like 350 when rally drivers they never go past like what 200, 250.
Well,
So
yeah.
it's not scary, but just you need to get used to it. Whereas MotoGP drivers, they do the exact same thing. They're going into
I think
speeds.
also they wouldn't be used to how late you can brake from such high speed in Formula One compared to a rally
Yeah,
car.
you need to brake
That-
really early.
They're going to be. I mean, it would be if we did this one-off race. If it was at Monza or Spa, it would be carnage at turn one because they're all going to be braking at different points and that.
But also, it would be funny because you would see, because you also saw that when they would swap rides, Rossi and Marquez, whatever, like when they went to Formula One cars, when they're turning for the first few turns, they're leaning because their body wants to lean
Yeah.
because
Well, the
of
thing is,
muscle memory.
they would probably be all right because, okay, they know the circuits for one thing because they race on the same ones more or less, but also they're used to the G-forces, sustained corners at high G. That wouldn't be a problem. I think it's just the speed you can go through the corners would be, and also the driving position couldn't be more different. But
Yeah, it's,
motor.
instead
But
of
yeah,
leaning forward, you're leaning backwards.
get people from different disciplines. I mean, we're very, very close. I mean, we've had it a few times in the past. You know, Montoya, Villeneuve, getting people from IndyCar. So that's something. Let's try NASCAR. Just get one of those rednecks from there and throw them in and see what they can do, if anything.
Get one of those Dakar
And then they
guys.
can have a fist fight with Max afterwards. And yeah,
One of those weird Dakar guys, Alatia, Peter Hansel, I mean, Sebastian Loeb. It's because Dakar is always one where I'm like, how good are these people? Are they not good enough for WRC, but incredibly good on like all terrain?
Yeah.
It's
unless you have a race with 10 F1 cars and get someone from WEC, WRC, rallying, NASCAR, IndyCar, all of those. What like one person from each.
Super Formula.
Super
Put the
Formula,
champion in there.
yeah, Formula E, maybe not one of the ones that did Formula One, but something like that. I know touring
I
cars.
would put that because Verline would win by like 10 seconds just because he knows how to drive.
Yeah. Obviously, one of the ones that's never done Formula One, but yeah, just something like that and throw them all in. I don't know, someone that's done fucking dragsters, or if there's big names in there, and just see
I mean,
who's going to do best in a Formula One car.
Drag racing isn't racing. You don't even turn
take off the
once.
downforce.
Yeah, he'll be leading at turn one, and then you won't see him again past turn one. Like he'll just gone straight off.
Well, it's talking about going straight off. We did go straight off there because there was one team we forgot to mention.
Well, two
Alpha Tauri,
teams,
whatever.
RB and Williams. Not much to say about Williams, but
Williams, I have absolutely nothing to say. Do you guys have anything to say?
They both got crashed into, and they both got knocked out in Q1 in sprint, didn't they? Or I don't
Exactly.
know.
Yeah.
And Colapinto's losing his shine. That's all.
Albon was just garbage.
I was going to say with Colapinto. Apparently now there's even more talks about Red Bull being interested in him for either Red Bull or RB for next year.
I hear more about Colapinto dating 5 different people who he's obviously not dating. And
Well, he's now basically a father of 3 or something, as from what I've heard.
Someone said he's dating the Princess of Norway. Like it's.
I think at the moment he's linked to what appears to be the most voracious predator in all of Latin America or something, according to Instagram.
Yeah.
So yeah. I don't know.
I mean, you don't know what's going on with Franco recently. He's lost a lot of his momentum. He's still a good driver, but not the way he would have wanted this to go. What I remember from the race was that, like, okay, Albon was a bit unlucky. He was, sent into a spin by Stroll, but he also hit Magnussen and got himself a 10-second penalty for causing a collision.
I don't remember that. But...
Yeah, he did, and then he crossed the line in last.
He was
his wing mirror.
I think in the fight, yeah, because his wing the wing mirror just came off. It's like, okay, so as well as the car crashing all the time, it can be defeated by the power of air as well, because the wing mirror just came off by itself. But he was on the final stint. He was on softs and they fell off. But then I think he tried to pit to get fastest lap and just ended up getting lapped and couldn't do his fast lap or something.
It bothers me how smiley he is in the press conferences after he's driven one of the worst races you can imagine. Like, I don't know if that's like Albon's secret. He's just so
well. I think it's because
mellow.
his teammate has always driven an even worse race than him. That's why he's happy.
I think you're right. I think you're right on that because
he's going to get a serious wake up call next year against Sainz.
My God, I said that a few weeks ago, but Sainz is good. We all know this, but every 6 races, Sainz literally outperforms Leclerc in every single way out of nowhere. And he is probably the best driver of the weekend. When that is going to happen to Albon is going to get out-qualified by a second, and there's going to be 10 positions between where they finish from each other. I'm scared for Albon on that.
I think Albon's going to be beaten comfortably, and he's just going to look like a lesser driver. I mean, Alex has some strengths, but overall, I just not only does he seem inconsistent, he's just such a lame character, in my opinion.
Would you say he fully deserves his spot on the grid? Would you say he fully deserves his spot on the grid?
He's backed by a bunch of Thai billionaires, so I don't know if he would even be in F1 if he didn't have that financial backing, because
That's a
Yeah.
big
I don't-
thing.
His
I
main
don't think he deserves it.
his main personality trait seems to be that he's a childless cat lady. Like
Yeah.
that seems to be his thing since the Twitch quartet is not a thing anymore.
I mean, do we think that he's a more exciting talent than some of these young guys coming through? Do we think would we rather see another person on the grid than him? I mean, I don't really know what Albon brings to the table that warrants people wanting him to drive for their team. I mean, he just doesn't.
He's
This
meant to
doesn't
be
seem
really
like
good
a
at
guy.
development. Remember, Red Bull was
Hmm.
like, he's the guy who develops the car the most during the title fights and all. So
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, when people say that, it's like, is he really any better than Max at development? And it's like, it was the same thing with talking about how Mercedes with Mick was really useful on simulators. And it's like, is he going to be any more useful than Lewis? Let's be honest. Like, when it comes to understanding that stuff, when he's so inexperienced. I mean, with Albon, I'm trying to think of an analogy of a driver from like 30 years ago where they had their shot early on with a good team, fluffed it, and then spent years just being mid and just there or thereabouts, other than like Johnny
Jos.
Herbert,
Jos
maybe,
Verstappen.
or Jos.
Johnny
yeah.
Herbert is kind of. I mean, Johnny, his whole career was ruined by his crash in
Yeah.
juniors, which ruined his leg. So I always feel a bit sad. You can see Johnny really like knows he could have had because Johnny Herbert was so highly rated before that crash.
Mm.
He was considered to be like the best British talent, and that crash ruined his braking. Something with he
can
wasn't
you
able to
specify
brake the
which
same way.
crash that is?
He had a crash in juniors.
It was Brands Hatch in, wasn't it,
I'll
British
figure it out.
F3 or International F3000?
Yeah,
He hit the bridge or something. Didn't he?
Brundle
1988,
Brundle also
1988
got a big
Brands
crash,
Hatch.
right?
Yeah, but that was in F1, yeah. So this one is an F3000. Johnny had a crash at Brands Hatch in 1988, and he was tipped to be like he wasn't just highly rated. People were comparing Johnny to Jackie Stewart, Jim Clark level drivers. Like he was incredibly highly rated because he was brilliant.
Mm.
And then after that crash, he was never the same. A bit like Panis, but Panis' drop off was even less. Johnny had a big drop off after the crash, but he still made it to F1, even though he lost probably a few tenths, not being able to brake the same way because of the pain in his leg.
And he sustained that for 10 years.
And he sustained that for 10 years. So I don't compare that to Albon. I would compare.
Albon doesn't have injury as an excuse.
No,
He just has himself.
But who else would
I mean,
you say
you mentioned Jos.
Jos.
I mean, that's an example.
Jos.
I mean, Jos was even
Yeah.
more mid afterwards, though. He
Yeah.
wasn't. I mean,
Yeah.
he was demolishing pay driver teammates, but also he was changing seats every 5 seconds.
I mean,
I
wait,
agree-
demolishing
I
pay
agree with
driver
that.
teammates. That really,
I mean, he's probably driven more Formula One cars than anyone in history. He tested for everyone in the second half of the 90s, like literally everyone. Maybe
Yeah.
that's why Max is so good because Jos got all that insider knowledge from every team in the 90s.
I mean, it's true, though. I mean, look at the teams that he drove for. Mild 7 Benetton, Simtech, Footwork, Tyrrell, Stewart, Arrows, Minardi.
And then he tested the Honda project before BAR.
He tested Jaguar as well, I think.
He did a Jag test. There was a test for probably Tyrrell. Yeah, he did tests for basically everybody.
He did something with 40 before he made it as well. So.
Yeah.
A lot of tests in every category. Yeah, Albon, it's hard to quantify, but Williams, another crush for them. I think they said
I know.
16th crush because of Colapinto.
I mean, at least
16.
this one wasn't their fault. But
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we saw. I mean, the other thing we mentioned before, him overtaking Checo in the pit lane. That there's a little bit of gutsiness in that kind of pizzazz you get from the newer drivers, just running rings around the fossils and that. But yeah, otherwise there's not much to say. It's just the car's crap again.
Yeah, and finally going into AlphaTauri, well, RB, they again not much to say other than Tsunoda had one of the best starts of the season. He started 15th. He was up to 9th after a lap, I think, 9th or 10th. Really good start. Got past all the trouble really well, and then just I think what was it some strategy and also just no pace.
He just kept going backwards. I don't think there was anything wrong with his. I mean, Yeah,
He
maybe
was
just
faster than Lawson. He was faster than Lawson, but yeah.
yeah. I mean, Lawson. Well, he hit Bottas at the start. He spun and then he got penalised, even though he'd already spun and Bottas carried on. Which they did that in Sao Paulo as well, which was kind of needless. But he wasn't in practice. He was complaining about Stroll, wasn't it, or Alonso or someone else. So he has an interesting attitude for a driver of relatively small caliber.
Yeah, I mean, I think Liam Lawson has already made a name for himself, and he's hit and miss, isn't he? Some races he's brilliant, and some races he's spinning because he doesn't have enough temperature in his tires. So the car wasn't slow. It's just that Liam made mistakes. Yuki's race was interesting because, like you said, he made the best start of the season, but he really seemed to struggle on those medium tires. I wonder why that was. Because he got mugged around the outside by like 3 or 4 drivers
Yeah.
in consecutive laps. I was like, what am I
Yeah.
watching here? It's like, can't you defend like that outside line? Like everyone is passing you there. So that was quite unfortunate. And so he just didn't have the pace and finished 13th. They need to figure out what on earth happened because now P6 looks like it's not going to happen for them in the constructors. So massively disappointing day. I know Tim Goss and the rest of the team will be. Tim Goss is their chief technical officer. He'll be furious because I think they really thought they could get P6 this season, and they had a car to get P6.
Yeah.
I think that they just haven't had the drivers to do it, and that's what happens when you sign Daniel Ricciardo and put faith in Yuki Tsunoda. Like, let's be honest.
So,
Like these
Pussy,
two.
would you put any of those two in the Red Bull?
No, I would consider Lawson, but I need to see more races from him. Like I want to see a season of Liam Lawson before I put him in Red Bull. Because the last thing you want to do is just throw someone in a Red Bull and see them get mauled by Max. You need to really make sure that whoever you're putting in that car is ready for it. Because Red Bull is not just about learning. When you go to the works team, you're supposed to perform. You're not being paid to learn. You're being paid to perform. And I don't think Liam is experienced enough. Like the guy's spinning on cold tires like Perez. So he needs the full season. Tsunoda, no. I don't like Tsunoda as a driver. He's inconsistent, yeah. And Colapinto is the same. Like, why would you put Franco Colapinto in a works Red Bull car? Like, to me, it's a really tough call now because like there isn't really a suitable candidate in the program in the academy to put in that Red Bull seat. I would consider maybe putting Lawson in if I had to put someone there. But
Or would you just keep Checo for now?
yeah, that's why Checo might be kept for another year because there's nobody else. I wouldn't keep Checo. I don't think Perez deserves another seat. Like I'm sorry, he just because you've lost the constructors because of Perez. How can you keep him?
I mean,
So-
the next update there is that apparently there's going to be a sit down with the board of directors after Abu Dhabi, and they'll just get rid of him unless he puts on like the best race of his life there.
Yeah,
But
no, I wouldn't keep Perez.
if Red Bull put Lawson or Colapinto in next year, it will have shown that they've learned nothing because it's going to be the same thing again. That they're just going to get annihilated by Max, and it's going to ruin them.
It's going to ruin their careers.
Yeah, that's the thing, and they don't need that because neither of them has done a full season yet. They need one full season in the B team. So
I'll tell you what I would have done. I would have put Carlos Sainz in that second seat, and I would have put Liam Lawson and Franco Colapinto in the junior team, and I would have told Tsunoda and Ricciardo to please escort themselves off the premises. So ultimately, Carlos Sainz would have been a perfect person to put in that second seat. Because he's not as good as Max, probably not as good as Max, right?
But there are too many personal issues apparently going on with Sainz. So
I mean, there is
between-
that option exists because he has that exit clause in his Williams contract that if a better team
They obviously
offers
just
would
don't
offer.
want it.
And I think even if he doesn't get Max, I feel like he would still take that if he thinks, well, we're going to be more competitive. But what I would have done was, put him in there and then put Tsunoda and Lawson in there because then you can keep Colapinto in the Williams. with Sainz going from it, because there's no one else. I mean, they're not going to put Luke Browning or Zach O'Sullivan in that thing anytime soon. So,
Why keep Tsunoda? Why keep Tsunoda, Peter? Like, what is he bringing?
yeah, I mean, I feel like this is the thing is, if we assume Sainz is an option, I would have said put Tsunoda in the Red Bull because you have to do it eventually if you're going to keep him that long in the B team. Because even if it's a similar position pace-wise to the other two, he has experience which you really need. And
I think it would be harsh to sack Tsunoda.
it's not fair
personally,
to keep him in the waiting room for this long and then just kick him out. Like, you have to give him
Especially
a go
when
eventually.
By hook or by crook, he's beaten all of his teammates. So I mean,
Yeah.
all of the ones that they've put against him.
He's had a lot of teammates thrown at him recently as well. It keeps
He beat
changing quite
Gasly?
a lot. Not Gasly.
Not
He
Gasly,
beat,
but
he beat
but
De
Gasly
Vries,
left.
Ricciardo, and Lawson. He's beaten all of them.
He hasn't really beaten Lawson in a full season, though.
Yeah, well,
Like, he's
Lawson
just
hasn't as of
He hasn't had a full season. I don't count that, and I don't think Red Bull are counting that either. But if you look at the people he's faced for a full season, it's been Ricciardo, it's been
Gasly.
Gasly.
Yeah, Ricciardo and Gasly.
That's it. That's
Yeah,
the
but
bench.
that's
Those are
their
the
fault.
two. Those are
That's
the
not
two
his
that you're looking at.
But that's not his
Yeah,
fault.
Yeah, I mean, it's not his fault, but like I can't say he's good because, or Red Bull can't even do. Like, I think that's why Red Bull are hesitating. You see, this guy has some serious flaws. They don't want to just take him because he like destroyed Nick DeVries. Like, give me a break. Nick DeVries shouldn't have even been in that car, man. Like,
I also
what was
want
that
it done
about?
just for the integrity of the pipeline and the junior teams, that we need to be promoting junior drivers properly. And again, that's why I'm thinking it's that with Doohan, he should be given a full season. Then they shouldn't just scrap his contract immediately to throw in Colapinto, because he was their reserve for a year and he did all the simulator and all the hard work, and he needs to be rewarded, because that's how it was in the 90s. You spent a year as the test driver and then you got given a
And
seat the next year.
He left Red Bull for Alpine, which was a huge move back then. Like, he was in the Red Bull Academy and he left for the Alpine Academy, which
Yeah.
will have, been a statement of intent of, I wanna help this team. There's no other.
And I mean, the Red Bull one is always so clogged up as well.
And
that-
the thing is, he wasn't sacked. Usually, you get sacked by the academy. He left. So, yeah. Well, let's just move into before we go into Formula 2. Let's talk about our tops and flops. Who were your Peter and Karen?
Tops.
Okay,
Max.
I have a top three. Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead,
Okay.
Peter.
Yeah. I'm still thinking on mine. So you do you.
Yeah, so my top three are, as Peter said, number one, Max. Number two is Joe Guan Yu, and number three is Pierre Gasly. And Alonso would be my four if there was a fourth, but I'm going to keep it to three. So it's going to be Verstappen, Joe, and Gasly.
Well, just to be quick, I think I'm going to have the exact same three because it's close between Alonso and Gasly, but you can't not put Gasly when he got a P5 in an Alpine. Again, and Alonso did have a great race as well and a great start, which was hampered by Checo swerving. So when Alonso went into the gravel, it's because Checo just came laterally for some reason. So yeah, those three as well. What about you, Peter?
Yeah, same three.
Yeah, it's hard to say anyone else.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
but
Alonso is the other contender for the top
They're
three.
the real standouts compared to
Yeah.
everyone else. The race was so messy; it's hard to say in a lot of people.
But what about the flop of the race? Because that's easier in terms of being different.
Flops.
Man.
Well, yeah. Lewis. Oh,
Yeah.
what was the other
Albon,
one?
Lewis,
We're
and
gonna
Hulkenberg. Like
We're gonna get
Albon,
called
Lewis,
Lewis haters because we're not assessing his entire psyche and mental state.
No.
when
Lewis
making
drove
this.
like garbage, but so did Hulkenberg and so did Albon. So that's a tough one between those three.
I was going to say Lewis, Checo, and the FIA.
Yeah,
Well, usually
Checo
we only
too.
have one flop, but fair enough that we have three in this
Well,
one.
we've always been doing three whenever I've.
Honestly, guys, like if I had to pick the driver that I thought drove like an idiot this race, like truly like an idiot, and someone who does not justify being in Formula One based on one race, like Perez was awful, Hamilton was awful, Albon was absolutely terrible, the FIA were a disgrace. Nico Hulkenberg drove horrifically. Let me just recap his race, okay? He's the one that hit Ocon at the start, okay? So that led to a double retirement. Then he got a puncture. Then he went to last. Then he spun off by himself after he got oversteer and then beached it in the gravel. So at least Albon finished the race. At least Hamilton finished the race. Perez didn't, but Perez didn't cause as many accidents as Nico did. Nico is my flop. If I had to pick one driver, Nico Hulkenberg was the worst driver in the race, in my opinion. So
Interesting. Yeah, I would put Lewis
okay.
just because it wasn't just the. He was obviously very unlucky. I want to make this clear, but it's not like he showed a lot of. That's the thing. Like I'm just seeing all those posts come up in my head about how he clawed back a 12-second deficit to the back markers, and yeah, but no, he just in terms of his mentality, trying to retire the car and all that, that didn't sit well with me.
Fair.
But
Fair.
yeah, in the past 3 years, he's been experiencing the kind of luck that literally every other driver has had to experience for their entire careers.
That's the thing. Like every time people bring up his, he's unlucky. I'm like, he drove for a Mercedes for 10 years. He drove for McLaren for 7 seasons.
His first car was the MP422. I mean, that car was a rocket ship. It was such a good car. You know, that's a car most drivers will never even come close to driving. So
Exactly.
he's been so lucky. He's been so lucky in his career.
Exactly.
So
So
lucky.
if now, oh no, he cannot get P5 in the 2024 Qatar Grand Prix, then no. Anyway, Formula 2 section now shouldn't be too long, but it's really hotting up for the final race of the season. Hadjar and Bortoleto are now separated by half a point. Firstly, well, just before we get into the race, who do you think is going to get it?
Probably Bortoleto of the two. He seems to just knuckle down and crack on with it, and Hadjar spends the whole race complaining over the radio and that. So, but there's more pressure for him because I mean he's more hot-headed, but also he doesn't have a seat next year. Whereas
Yeah.
Bortoleto has the Sauber seat, Aaron's got his Alpine reserve spot, and Hadjar has nothing. And if he wins it, they kind of have to give it to him because he can't.
Isn't he kind of Red Bull reserve driver right now? I mean, it's Lawson, but
He
he's
was
the one doing
last
the
year.
FP1s.
They had like 4 reserves one year. I don't know, but that's not doesn't count.
He's also doing the FP1 in Abu Dhabi. I think he's the next in line, but which is good there because usually being next in line you do get a seat. But yeah, he doesn't have anything officially.
But also, if he wins the title, they kind of have to do something with him because they know he can't do Formula 2 anymore.
Well, there's a big issue. It's that they've put him as FP1 for Max in Abu Dhabi, and that's gonna kind of mess up his weekend. Like every single driver who's had FP1 and a Formula 2 weekend in a Formula 2 weekend has kind of. I mean, it makes sense, right? You're driving a Formula 1 car, then you have to adapt to those Formula 2 cars again. It's within a few hours of each other, and you have to set a quali lap. So I think that's not going to help him much. And Bortoleto is just more composed anyway. So, yeah, but the actual race, that was some of the people who scored points. I mean, Christian Mansell scored points, John Bennett scored points, Beganovic finished, what, 5th? Bunch of rookies and just random drivers.
Yeah, I mean, I think three rookies scored points, or 4 if you count Goethe. It was just, it was mad because I mean, Carl Bennett, he did John Bennett.
Carl Bennett is the wet guy, I think.
Oh yeah. Isn't he the one from No
Thailand or something? Yeah.
Thailand, yes, yeah. No, but yeah, so John Bennett, because he did one round of Formula 3, but then he stalled at the start of the race, and he got lapped because the start of the second lap, he was like crawling along by the pit wall, so something had gone wrong. So he was 2 laps down at one point, and then obviously got to 1 lap, so was somehow finished 8th. I don't know where that came from. Beganovic, he did that like double pass, or did something, didn't he? And he got 5th. Luke Browning, well, he was 15. I mean, he spun like 10 times across the weekend or whatever. So
Beganovic also qualified 4th.
So Beganovic,
his teammate.
He did all right when he's been kind of mid in like Formula 3, and he's been around for donkey's years now as an FDA junior and all of that. But yeah, some of the others were
Context, Ciaron, Beganovic is the Swedish guy who's basically the next in line at Ferrari right now. There's no one between the top drivers and this guy who is going to defeat F2 next year. Yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of screwed because Behrman won't be a junior anymore. They're giving that reserve role to Artur because, of course, they are.
And they're trying to. That's why they're begging Joe to join because they have no one else.
Because otherwise, it's Antonio Fuoco. He was meant to be doing FP1 in Abu Dhabi, and they're like, no, we're just going to throw in Leclerc's brother instead. But Fuoco, I get that he's not on the pipeline and he's doing WEC and he won Le Mans, but he's been with Ferrari since 2013 in some capacity, and he was Leclerc's teammate in GP Formula 2, and he's been very loyal to them. So why not do something nice for him?
Has he never done a Formula 1 session? No.
I think he has done FP1. He must have. No, he's done like the post-season young drivers tests, but I don't think he's done a Grand Prix weekend.
He never did an official session because Giovinazzi was always ahead of him.
Yeah, but
so I think it would have been a really good way to reward him for what he's been doing in WEC. Whereas Archie Leclerc hasn't done anything. This is pure nepotism. He's not good. He hasn't won anything.
He only won sprint races in Formula 2 and Formula 3 as well.
Yeah, that doesn't count. Jehan Rubala won like 5 sprint races.
He took out his teammate on the final lap of a sprint in Hungary in Formula 2, Jack Crawford, fighting over like 4th place or something.
And
on the final lap.
Freca, he was seen as good because he finished second to Petikov, and Petikov never got a Formula 2 career. So, yeah, I mean, long story short, Archie Leclerc is going to get an FP1 session just because he's Charles' brother. We're talking about Formula 1 here in 2024. You're giving an FP1 session to someone's brother.
I bet what's going to happen is Lewis will do a year with Ferrari. It'll go really badly. He'll retire, and then in 26 we've got the Leclerc brothers driving there. They'll make it happen if they think we can have literal brothers on the same team. And
for context, Ciaron, Archer finished like 15th in Formula 2. He's not good. He's mid.
Didn't he get fired by Dams or something? Or basically because they
got like fired. He just isn't. He's gonna be doing like endurance racing probably. So he's not a great guy.
He can stat pad in WEC, where there's like 2 other people helping with the results. I don't know.
Yeah, and even in WEC, I don't think he's gonna do hypercar. That's the thing. That's how bad we're talking. I think he's like LMP2 level.
Yeah.
So yeah,
some of the others. Antonelli.
He's a development driver for Scuderia Ferrari, and that's just clear nepotism. It's just not even. What a joke! What a joke! Yeah. Honestly, like that is disgraceful. And looking at this guy's junior career, you guys know a lot more than I do. This is a joke. Like, what am I even looking at?
The Freca thing in 2020, that was the second season of Freca, and he lost to Petikov by crashing in the final race. Because I think they finished 1-2 in more than half the races that season, but that was a grid of 10 full-time drivers. And the other drivers, it was like Pierre-Louis Chauvet, Patrick Pasma, Oliver Rasmussen, Jamie Chadwick.
None of them made it to like Formula 2.
Yeah, I mean, Yuri Vips did like 2 rounds and got podiums in each of them or something in Freca that year. But yeah, it was a useless grid. I mean, Freca in general is a fraudulent series in terms of driving standards and who's doing it. But that wasn't good for him. But yeah, the Freca champion from last year, I mean, Antonelli, he failed to finish both races. I think, did he get wiped out of both of them, or he got
no someone crashed.
Vershaw hit him in the pit lane and broke his steering in the feature race. In the sprint race, wasn't he punted off or he spun? Or
no, I think feature race was when he got the issue. Sprint race was something else. Sprint race he got crashed into, I think.
Something like that. So that didn't go. Or I'm sure he did it himself, or he was involved in some way. But yeah, I mean, Vershaw, just everything he does is illegitimate. He shouldn't be there anymore. Like, it doesn't count if he does anything. And he finished right for Hauger wasn't. I was thinking, was Hauger in the race? Whereas he wasn't in that this weekend because he's doing. He moved to Indy Next, which I'll be honest, that can only feel like a drop down in terms of the level because Indy Next is the feeder series to IndyCar.
IndyCar, yeah. So.
Having done Formula 2 for like 20 years now, so then it's. I mean, his career's rapidly going down the toilet.
And he was meant, when he won Formula 3, he was meant to be the next big Red Bull thing. So like in theory, we should have been talking about Hauger right now, trying to get the RB seat. He was very highly rated, and now he's just nowhere. It was nice to see the top 3 be the top 3 in the standings this late into the season. It gave some credibility to the standings to have Bortoleto, Hadjar, and Aaron in the top 3. But it does mean that Aaron will finish this very good season with a reward as a reserve driver for a team that obviously does not respect their drivers, Alpine. But also, I'm wondering what happens with Victor Martinez. Is he not a reserve driver anymore? What?
I guess not. I mean, he's been kind of forgotten about. I mean, he had a garbage weekend, but he kind of
So,
picked
you know
it
what
up
I mean?
again.
Because Doohan is being promoted. He was the reserve driver, and now they're
Yeah.
saying Aaron is the reserve driver. So what happens to the
To
actual guy
Martins.
who?
Yeah,
Martin?
I don't know. This is why it all looks a bit funny because so Aaron is a high tech driver, so Oaks knows him and there's that connection. I doubt this is a consideration, but an ex Mercedes junior and they're taking on Mercedes engines. Martins, it's not working. Like Formula Renault, he was amazing. Formula 3, he was amazing. Formula 2, it just has not landed for him.
He is fast. It just I don't know what's happening.
He's probably going to end up in WEC at this rate, or
Yeah.
God forbid,
He
Formula
did
E.
the Alpine WEC test thing, so I think he has already started to shift focus towards driving for Alpine in WEC. But yeah, so going into the last weekend is going to be a half a point between Hadjar and Bortoleto. Bortoleto already has his seat. Hadjar doesn't. And as I said, I'm going to be rooting for Hadjar just to see how Red Bull will deal with it, because you cannot ignore someone who wins it in either their first or second year, but they're going to have to ignore it. So probably he's going to just be waiting in the pipeline for something to happen to Checo and Lawson to get promoted, or Lawson does badly. I mean, what I'm saying is I'm pretty sure Hadjar is in an F1 car. Okay, that's going to be my call here. Hadjar is in an F1 car for 2026. I'm not sure if it will be before or after, but in 2026 we will see Hadjar in an F1 car.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not massively bothered who wins it, I guess, because I mean, Aaron and Bortoleto have their seats sorted for next year, and Hadjar's just really annoying. But the result. I'm just looking at it. It's not on Formula E levels, but it is just like an orgy of inconsistency in terms of results. Because Hadjar, he's had so many races where miles outside of the points, and is only half a point off the title lead. And Paul hasn't had that many races where he was bad, but he was leading by quite a margin for some time. And everyone else is all over the place. I mean, Antonelli's all over the place. Behrman is miles down, considering he was the first driver to get picked up by a team for next year. He's had a huge number of races where he was nowhere near the points.
But Bortoleto, that's the thing. He's been super consistent compared to that shit show of drivers.
Well, that was the same last year, wasn't it? He just won by falling upwards in Formula 3.
I mean, he was doing well. He was just not winning. He's just very consistent.
he got 2 wins, and that was enough. I mean, what's his face? Fornaroli took that to extremes. He won the title without a single win this year.
Yeah, Ciaron, the Formula 3 champion this year, didn't win a single race.
I mean, God, I could not believe it when you shared again the results from Formula E when De Vries won it. Like,
oh yeah,
I was like, that's
Ciaron,
like.
did you know that the Formula E champion, when De Vries won it, didn't have 100 points? We're talking 14 races with the same point system as Formula 1. And De Vries that year had 98 points.
I mean, either that was a really good grid or a really bad grid. And judging from De Vries, probably a really
it was a
bad
COVID grid. I think that's what it was.
I think wasn't almost the entire field in title contention in the final round.
Going into the finale, 14 drivers could have won it. 14 drivers could have won.
I mean, that's.
Let's look at this again. I've got the wrong season up.
So what season was this exactly?
2021?
2020, 2021.
2020.
Because they do football kind of 2 years in the name.
Well, every single race he's getting points for that fucking fan boost thing or whatever it is. We don't get points for that, do you? But
the Merc drivers always got fan boost, De Vries and Van Dorn.
The most consistent driver was Rene Rast, and he was finished 13th. But he at least was vaguely scoring points each time. I mean, so
and the issue with that season is that Wehrlein was disqualified from winning. So you just add 25 to his tally, and he is the only driver with 100 plus.
Yeah, he would have done it, wouldn't he?
And he would have been the only one with 100 plus. And I was like, he won the race. And do you know why he got disqualified? Because his team did not fill in a tire document in time. So instead of a fine, they disqualified the driver,
Yeah.
which is outrageous.
I mean, De Vries, he won the title with results of first, 9th, retired, first, 16th, retired, 9th, retired, 13th, 18th, second, 22nd, 8th.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just seeing on Instagram, Wehrlein got voted German Driver of the Year 2024, which is quite big because usually German Driver of the Year, I mean, it's Schumacher, Vettel, very Rosberg, very big names. So,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, they're not racing.
But there's no one else. At
Well,
the
yeah, the
moment.
2024. Who was really? I mean, Mick is doing WEC, but German
Yeah.
drivers in other stuff.
There's Maro Engel in DTM. I mean, there's a big, and Nico Hülkenberg, obviously.
Yeah.
There
It's not a
is
terrible
like a
grid,
gap.
but it's not a great grid. Yeah.
It's just that how can you be that bad? Like, just that. I'm looking at this and I'm like, can you just disqualify the whole championship and just write it off? That's not you can't be given a title for those results.
Yeah.
If you're all going to be, I mean, there are races. I mean, the amount of disqualifications is obscene. There's 5 disqualifications in one of the races.
Yeah,
Like-
this is a very bizarre season. Just looking at it, like this was just a poorly driven season by like 15 drivers. Like,
I mean, Degrassi mostly scored points, but yeah, 12 points off the title. At the end
look
of
at
it.
De Vries had a 9th, a 16th, a 13th, an 18th, and a 22nd, and won the title by 7 points.
But
Bizarre.
even when even in the races he did well, it's really bad results. I mean, it's not wins.
Yeah, so for 15 races, he scored points 7 times.
Yeah, it was that season was insane. Like 14 races and you don't have 100 points.
Did anyone? I'm wondering if anyone got less than 7 from that.
I mean, Oliver Rowland got disqualified 3 times that season.
Why is Buemi 21st?
That's because the Nissan that year was terrible, and he started to care
Again, that's the thing.
because he had won so many times. Like since the new gen cars, Buemi hasn't been giving a fuck, and Wehrlein has been really good with the new gen. So that's.
But again, the thing is, you say because the Nissan's bad, but it's like, but it's a spec series. They're the same cars.
No, but no. They have different powertrains.
Oh, they have different engines, but it's okay.
Yeah. If you go in teams and drivers, all the chassis, you have different chassis and different powertrains, so engines. So it's spec, but it's not spec. So for example, last year Jaguar and Porsche was here, and Maserati whatever are bad. So it's not really spec anymore. It's
the same chassis, but different powertrain. I mean, that's like IndyCar. It's between Chevy and Honda for engines.
Exactly. But the thing is, powertrains, there are like 5 or 6 different ones. So it really matters who has it. And at the moment, Porsche and Jaguar have the good ones. And that year, where was Buemi? Buemi was
Nissan were 10th.
Yeah, exactly. And his teammate was Ollie Rowland, who was 14th. I mean, yeah. Anyway, the Formula E is a shit show, and it was terrible to follow.
Yeah. Just one of the many series that people who don't last in Formula One or don't make it to F1 have to go racing. So,
well, at least next year it's going to be free to air again. I think they realised that putting it on some PPV channel network that no one's heard of wasn't good for ratings, so it's going to be on ITV next year.
Because at least when it's on ITV, people who like cars are just going to put it.
Yeah, it's gonna be like it's like British touring cars. It's on because you can just watch it for free and you don't need to be invested in it. Like, why not? And you'll see some mindless destruction and good crashes and maybe a fist fight or whatever. So yeah, why not? It's good entertainment.
Also, Peter, I was confused that Zane Maloney took the race this weekend because I thought him going to Formula E meant he was barred from Formula 2, but he was there. So,
well, the first Formula E race is this weekend Abu Dhabi. So he can't do that. But yeah, I guess he just thought, well, I may as well, even though that's him just conceding the title. Because at the beginning of the season, it looked like he was going to take the Formula 2 title.
Yeah, and everyone was saying he's taking the seat.
And I thought he would go to Sauber because, again, Sauber Junior, but that never happened. But yeah, he was garbage this weekend and then fluked his way into points. Even so, with everything that happened, crazy results. I hate that Qatar keeps doing this. Like, can you stop giving us good races, even if they're manufactured? Because we don't need all these 10,000 Middle Eastern tracks on the calendar.
Yeah, like 2021, it was meant to be shit. And then obviously Alonso gets his podium, and everyone was talking about it. So
There were punctures as well that happened,
Yeah,
and then last year was the heat wave, and the sprint race was unironically good, and then they had that mandatory 3-stop, which made the actual race kind of interesting as well.
I think I don't like the actual LaSalle track. I've always said like I don't mind the actual track, but I agree with you. I think like just giving tracks to places that have money is not good for the sport. The other thing I didn't like about some of these races in that, like in Bahrain, for example, and other places, is that you always know the weather is going to be like one way. Like there's no chance of like a sudden rainstorm or something changeable. It's always like a dry race.
you get a lot of wind, though. That can impact sometimes.
That's true. That's a good point. So maybe the wind actually compensates for that.
I think they
but,
were saying it was very windy this weekend, and maybe that explains some of the spins we saw.
Okay, well, that's fair then.
I don't remember that ever necessarily being an issue. Bahrain, I don't remember races that are like, oh, it's windy and that might throw us off. It doesn't seem to be a thing in Abu Dhabi, but it's so enclosed with all the grandstands.
I mean, Abu Dhabi is an awful circuit. I mean, the facilities look spectacular. Credit to the, I guess, UAE, but like the circuit is just.
I mean, aesthetically, I love it, but it's just not
I
good.
agree.
It doesn't
They
make
should
good
void the
races.
2012 Abu Dhabi results.
And I think the changes they made it worse. By the way, guys, I like the new Abu Dhabi track is not more exciting than the.
Yeah, the big round thing, because that those chicanes, that was where all the action happened. What little action there was pre 2021. Obviously, both chicanes, that's where the action happened on the last lap of the 2021.
Do you guys think they should void the 2012 Abu Dhabi results? I think they should.
Do you mean just pretend it didn't happen so that we don't have the excuse that, it produced a good race without being a title decider one time?
Yeah, I mean, no,
No,
definitely not.
2012. So like Vettel doesn't get 15 points and Kimi doesn't get 25, and then
No. They should definitely not do that. They should void the 2005 Brazilian Grand Prix, and they should void the 2012 Valencia Grand Prix just because I felt like it. So at the end of the day, like, yeah, we need to remember that, like, and I really mean this. Like, even the U.S. now is like wanting like 4 or 5 tracks. Like, that's great, and like, the Middle East, Asia, like, okay, like, it's good to having one track in these areas. Like, I get it, but at the end of the day, like, the circuits that I really like are mostly in Europe, and that's because that there's a sporting atmosphere.
Therefore, you are racist and no, I'm joking.
My point is, it's a sporting atmosphere.
And it is a European sport in terms of its heritage. Again, all the teams are European because Haas is not an American team. They're all based in Europe. That's where most of the fan base is, most of the staff as well. The mechanics, the engineers, they're all from European countries. That's just how it is. It doesn't mean to say we should only race in Europe, but priority needs to be given to Europe.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I want to stress. Is like I'm okay with having like one race in the Middle East or in the US or in Asia or whatever. I'm not saying we shouldn't be going there at all. It's just I think that the European tracks should be given priority, and they're the best tracks. They're the ones with the best fans. These are the fans that have been watching, whether the sport was popular or not, before Drive to Survive and after it. This is where the sport lives and was born and bred. So, why on earth are we thinking of scrapping Spa for a track somewhere, God knows where?
I mean, Monza at least just got an extension until 2031 on its contract, so they've done that. But Spa, it's always 1-year extensions. When Vegas, off the bat, before it even come in, it's like, it's here for 10 years.
Exactly.
So no one asked for this. So no, you only did that race for Ricciardo, and he's not even on the grid anymore. But yeah, America has had 11 circuits that have been used in Formula One at one time or another. It's always had a lot, even though there's been gaps of periods of not much going on. But they've had Indy, Sebring, Riverside, Watkins Glen, Long Beach, Caesars Palace, Dallas, Phoenix, Kota, Vegas, and I'm missing one. Detroit. Yeah.
Detroit. It's just bothering though, Peter, because we're no longer going to places, even though the sport could get away with this, it's so popular now. We're not going to places anymore for the circuits or even the fan base. It's just pure capitalism now. It's just like,
It's
let's go.
vibes, and so the drivers can
It's
get
vibes.
photographed with celebrities that nobody over the age of 16 has heard of.
And
as
you have
well.
circuits. You have circuits like Watkins Glen and Sonoma and Laguna Seca and Indianapolis. But it's like, let's go to Miami.
Oh,
Let's go to
Miami! I
Vegas.
missed Miami when I was listing. I think I said Detroit twice. Yeah, that's how
Yeah.
forgettable Miami is. Yeah, I said it before. Miami in the 80s would have been insane, but it doesn't work in modern Formula One at all. Yeah, it's. I mean, the argument is that because America is a massive country, that you need to treat it like a continent rather than a country, and so it should have more than one race. But it's like, I don't like the amount of circuits because we're already having to sacrifice the Hockenheimring, the Nürburgring. It's not in Europe, but Sepang is gone. We need somewhere in France, even though all their circuits are useless. Like it's.
But why is the U.S. getting and other regions even getting 4 circuits? Britain only has one.
Yeah,
That
I mean
doesn't make any sense to me.
we have
That's
three.
a very good point. I never thought of that.
We have three
Well, why-
circuits that could be used. It because I think Brands Hatch and Donington, if they finished fixing Donington up, those are both still Grade 1 circuits.
Is there a more dedicated fan base to Formula One than the UK? Like Italy, maybe. Like they're really hard to
May-
Such a
find.
good point. I never thought about
It's
how
the most dedicated
Italy,
fan base.
It is, yeah. And
Italy
this-
basically has two with similar, but yeah,
well,
England
Italy had
should have
three.
another,
It
yeah,
had
but-
3 races in 2020: Mugello, Imola, and Monza.
yeah. I mean, England also had 2 Silverstones. So.
Yeah, but they were both Silverstone. I mean, I would say we have a British Grand Prix. I would say let's have an English Grand Prix, but then everyone's going to cry racism if you do that. And we have to have the flag of St George.
The Tudor Dynasty Grand Prix, the Stuart Dynasty Grand Prix.
Yeah, or we could do do a race at Knockhill, and then we can have the Scottish Grand Prix. That's their only circuit. Welsh, God forbid, we can race at fucking Anglesey or like Bridgend has a circuit. I think do one of them.
Well,
There you
so
go.
Donington still has Grade A.
I think it's still Grade 1 because that I remember that being
Yeah.
a thing. That was around 2009, 2010 when they basically demolished the whole thing and tried to rebuild it to replace Silverstone, and then they just never finished it. And now it still looks like a building site or something. I don't know. But Brands Hatch, I presume, is still Grade 1 because it hasn't changed since the 1980s when they last did it.
But I don't
I
think
love
they'd be able
Donington.
to accommodate.
Maybe
All
to be
those
fair,
fat cars.
the pit lane is kind of tiny, but then they got away with it in
That's
the
what I'm saying,
80s.
the
So
pit lane is tiny, but also just the main straights. There are no overtakes there. Like it's not going to happen with the fat cars.
I mean, cars will be crashing all the time because the camber is off the charts, and
Yeah,
they'd be botting them out. Everyone would be botting them out going through Paddock Hill Bend. It would be a nightmare for working out setups. But it's not. The thing is, it needs to be Silverstone. Like Formula One, it is Silverstone in Britain. Like it can't be anywhere else.
What a shame. Well, it could be Silverstone something else. Yeah, Brands Hatch and Donington are Grade 2.
Yeah.
they're not
There's
Grade
ones
1.
that like it balks me still that in Australia Bathurst is Grade 3. Like it really is asking for it to have Formula One cars trying to race there. It has to be done because it's got that circuit has everything, and ignoring the fact it's in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, Albert Park and Adelaide, they're great, but they're not Bathurst.
No, they're not.
but yeah, sadly the next race is Abu Dhabi, and it will be the season finale. And it has generally the season has looked a bit long. I mean, even with the title race, it's been long. So yeah, looking forward to the finale actually.
24 races. God, it has been a lifetime.
It
This time.
has. And, I think sprint races are a giant waste of time. Like, I really hope that they scrap the sprint race format, kind of bring it back to a more traditional, just like practice race. And maybe look at just, ending the season a bit earlier and making it more suspenseful rather than going for the volume approach. But yeah, anyways, there's a lot to look forward to next week. Going to Abu Dhabi, and we have Alpine seeking to keep their 6th in the constructors, and I think the other major storyline and the main storyline is who will win the constructors title, McLaren versus Ferrari, and I'm going to predict that McLaren will win the constructors and that Alpine will hold on to their 6th place. No, I'm going to predict that McLaren will hold on to their constructors and Haas will take 6th from Alpine because Alpine will put a rookie who doesn't know what he's doing in that race and will cost them. That's my prediction.
Yeah, if anyone got knocked up as celebration for Max winning in Bahrain, they could be pushing that baby out during Abu Dhabi.
Yeah,
It's been about 9 months, the season.
Exactly. It's been it's been a long one, and I don't know. I mean, unless something happens in the final round that changes everything. I mean, it's been a long season, but it hasn't exactly been like a nail biter. It's kind of just dragged on by necessity.
There's been a few good races, but the British media have been pretending it's been better than it has been. Basically,
Exactly.
It's more been a demonstration of just how good Max is compared to literally everyone else. That's the main takeaway.
Yep, exactly. So,
Yeah, could be that there are some things at play in the last race. I won't be as interested as last year because fourth place in the standings was at play, and I really wanted Alonso to be in there. But yeah, the season, McLaren's going to win it anyway. So let's see. Maybe Leclerc can try to pip Lando to P2 in the standings.
Yeah, only a few days to Abu Dhabi, and then we can finally close the curtain on 2024. You've been listening to the DRS Train podcast. We're on YouTube and Spotify, and you can find us on Instagram and X at the DRS Train podcast. Make sure to tune in for our next episode. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.